Welcome to the March meeting of Planning Applications Committee. I'll run straight into the agenda. I think I can deal with this because I've been informed of all of them. The apologies for absence are we've been hit by COVID in some ways. Councillor Dean cannot make it and is being replaced by Councillor Latif. Councillor Quilliam can't make it and is being replaced by Councillor Butler. Simon McGrath, Councillor McGrath can't make it and is not being replaced by another member of his group. So we're down to just 9 members this evening.
Chair, I also have to report lateness.
Oh yes, of course. Councillor Henry is on her way. Apparently there are some public transport issues. She is on her way and we very much hope she'll get here in time for the first item. Item number 2 on the agenda, declarations of pecuniary interests. Do we have any? No? Okay, good, thank you. Item number 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. Can they be agreed? Agreed, thank you. So item 4 is we move on to the applications in front of us tonight, of which there are 6. Now, I'll explain things as we go along to members of the public in the room and at home who may not have attended a planning applications committee before. We don't take the items in the order they're listed. We try our best to take those with more speakers first and down to those at the end, which have fewer speakers. We have at least 1 speaker on every item tonight. So the order in which we will take the items is first item number 7, and then 9, then 5, then 6, then 10, and then 8. So those are the 6 items. I guess if they take roughly half an hour each, I don't know, the meeting may go on for about 3 hours. So probably after 2 or 3 items, I will have a short interlude for us to go and get water, go to the toilet, whatever we need to do. So there will be a short break, some point in the middle. Okay, so for the benefit of objectors, applicants, supporters, council members, any speakers, the way it will work is as follows, and I'll use the example of item number 7, which is the first one we will take. The meeting opens with the discussion on each item opens with a presentation by the planning officer with responsibility for the item, who will give us a presentation on it. We then hear from any objectors who get 3 minutes each to a maximum of 2 objectors. We then hear back from agents or supporters who get an equivalent amount of time. So here. So if, for instance, there is 1 objector, they get 3 minutes, the agent then gets 3 minutes. If there are 2 objectors, 3 minutes each, the agent will get 6 minutes. After that, the planning officer may come back to clarify or pick up on any points made in the contributions from members outside the committee. Then we move on to questions from members of the committee. From that point on, in each application, it's just members of the committee that can speak, unless specifically allowed by the chair. Then we come questions, which is questions of clarification on the factual elements of the reports. Then we come on to an actual open debate on the merits or not of the applications in front of us and the officer's recommendations. And finally, we then go to a vote to either approve, reject, or defer to a future meeting. Those are the 3 choices in front of us on each application. Okay, so we'll go straight into item number 7 on the agenda, which is the Rufus Industrial Estate, which is one that we looked at in the last meeting and deferred to this meeting. So I can invite Tim Bryson to give us his report on his report.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application was originally presented to the committee on the 10th of February this year, where members voted to defer the application for the reasons set out on page 90 within the agenda. So just for clarification, it was to do with further detail on the type of contamination identified on the site some further clarity on the financial costs of the contamination and the viability of the scheme. And also with the affordable housing block, which is block D within the application, whether they could be actually amalgamated with the market housing within the other buildings. For ease of reference, members, I've put in there where the additional paragraphs have gone into the report. So for example, contamination paragraphs 12.2 and 12.3 are the additions. So hopefully you've followed that within the report. Notwithstanding that, Chair, I will go through the application slides that we have before you on the application. So the site is located south of Dawlish Avenue, accessed off Hazelmere Avenue, within the northern part of the borough. You have residential to the northwest, train line to the east, and the recreation ground to the southwest. To the immediate north, over here is currently a development which is very nearly completed, which is formerly known as Hazelmere Industrial Estate, is now known as Earlsfield Place. The site comprises commercial buildings with a mixture of B1 and B8 uses. So the proposal itself is for a full redevelopment of the site to provide 96 residential flats and also 880 square meters of commercial floor space at ground floor level. Running through some of the floor plans at ground floor level would be largely the commercial aspects and also the servicing, bike storage facilities for the development. A turning head is created at the end of the new road. The new road would feed off the existing new road that just been constructed at Earlsfield Place. A undercroft is proposed, which would allow for future access, should that ever come about, for pedestrians and cyclists, with the potential to access through to the recreation ground to the southwest. Members should note that the proposal doesn't include any alterations to the recreation ground. Some site pictures, so existing buildings on site, largely 3-storey, of simple brick appearance. This is a shot further down looking south on the newly constructed Earlsfield Place with townhouses on the right hand side and 6-storey flats on the left. A view from Durnsford Road Recreation Ground. The site, you can just see some of the buildings through here. The building in the background is a building under construction within Wandsworth. And again here from the recreation ground. This is a view from the access way that leads up to Wellington Works at the back of the site. So the site is on the left and the site boundary is where this fencing is here. Again, looking from the access way at the back through the site. The closest neighbouring residential properties to the site is at 40A, 40B Dawlish Avenue here on the left-hand side. The site is on the right-hand side here. Just some developments in the local area that have been constructed. In terms of the flats and the layout, all flats would be dual aspect. So for example, these flats here, views through the front and back. The linear approach of the development ensures that they are all dual aspect and they have been designed so that the majority have their own independent access onto the external walkways. It is a stepped approach to the building. This is the roof plan. There's a variety of outdoor spaces here and also up here. This is a view of the proposal from the railway track side. So the existing Earlsfield Place construction is here, and this is the proposal here. So it does step up as it goes southeast into the corner of the site. In terms of materials, it would be a variety of facing brick with aluminium frame windows. So viewed from sort of within the site, you can see the stepped down appearance as this goes northwest within the site. The elevation, essentially that would face Durnsford Road Recreation Ground. So as I said, the design has put the tallest elements of the building in the southeast corner and then stepped down towards northwest as it goes towards neighbouring residential properties. Again, the site on the site before you here, looking from the other side, so from the Dawlish Avenue side. Block D, which is the affordable housing block, is here. So that is a 3-storey building, largely tallying up with the 3-storey townhouses on the adjacent development just completed. So it is much closer, obviously, towards neighbouring properties, which is why it is 3-storey. Some 3D visuals proposed with the application from the applicant, just to guide members in terms of how to envisage the complete design, and also from the recreation ground itself. From within the site, the affordable housing block here. And then from there's an access way at the rear which serves the Dawlish Avenue houses, and this is how they envisage the view from back there. And so, members, we do have the full set of floor plans here. So as it goes up in height, you can see that it steps away, full to 8 stories at the top. Just a snapshot of some of the flats. As I said, use of external walkways have independent access for people's own front doors. Each flat has an private outdoor terrace. Just some section drawings, really to show you that the railway line is actually higher up than the ground level of the site. So, members, overall, officers consider the additional information put forward has hopefully satisfied members with the reasons for deferral. You'll note that we have put in an Appendix 1 at the back of the report behind the plans, which is a letter specifically from the affordable housing provider who is looking to take on the Block D. To assist members there. I'll draw your attention now to the modifications sheet, where we've received further objections from the councillors for the area, with officers' response, and also putting in there as well the additional information which the applicant sent and which was sent round to members yesterday. So overall, Chair, officers remain happy with the scheme, recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Okay, as I explained, the next part is to hear from, on this occasion, 2 objectors. I'll take them in the order I have them on my list. So the first one will be Chris Beach. Is Chris in the building? Okay. You should be able to switch your microphone on with the button in front of you. Brilliant, thank you. You have 3 minutes. This will light orange when you've got a minute to go.
I'm actually taking 6 minutes, so the other person hasn't come along. I request the application is refused for the following reasons: incomplete disclosure, failure to maximise development in Merton, social segregation, mass and height, and urban greening. Disclosure: the independent assessor's report on the financial viability assessment, or the FVA, has only been made available to the public in the last 36 hours. This is an important document as contains key information related to the estimated costs, which are extremely high and being used by the developer to justify features which the community strongly object to, such as height, bulk, and no road link to Wellington Works. The assessor's report that has now been provided is in draft form and missing critical sections required for appropriate due diligence and transparency, such as Appendix 1, the Potter Raper cost review, and Appendix 2, the viability appraisal. In addition, from what I can see, the assessor's report does not cover the significant abnormal costs estimated by the developer. The developer's cost estimate must be independently verified, and the application should not be approved without sharing the complete and final assessor's report plus any additional assessment of the abnormal costs with the public. In the absence of the independent assessor's report, I requested a quantity surveyor with 20 years experience of estimating costs for commercial and residential developments to review the financial viability assessment provided by the developer. This was submitted as a representation. His view was that many of the costs appear inflated. Many of the abnormal costs in the FVA have been extrapolated from the adjacent Hazelmere estate without any on-site investigation at Rufus. Rufus is a different site to Hazelmere. It was constructed in 2000 and will have undergone asbestos and radiological remediation at that time. It was illegal to use asbestos at the time of construction of Rufus, and therefore risk of contamination is very low, yet a cost of £200,000 has been estimated by the developer. It is not appropriate to just extrapolate from Hazelmere to Rufus. The developer states that elevated radiological levels have been detected on the boundary with Hazelmere. However, there have been no measurements or testing on the Rufus site. The developer has also not confirmed what radiological remediation occurred at Hazelmere, yet they estimate a cost of £800,000 for Rufus. Given the size of this cost and the level of uncertainty, I suggest the developer undertakes measurement or survey work on site for minimal cost to improve the confidence in the estimates and reduce the risk premium that is evidently being applied. The quantities and direct costs associated with the contamination remediation on the adjacent Hazelmere site should also be shared with the public. Number 2, maximising development. In order to maximise residential development in the area, both Rufus and the adjacent site of Wellington Works must be developed to full potential. The only way to develop Wellington Works to full potential is to provide vehicle access through Rufus. If not, Wellington will not be developed at scale due to unsafe access provisions. The developer has stated in their design access statement that a new road through Rufus is possible, but it would require an increase in costs. This could be accommodated with savings from remediation and construction estimates. A petition for the road link has been signed by over 350 people. The benefits of a road link would be maximum residential development for Merton Council and highway safety preserved for local residents, including children of Wimbledon Park Primary, by taking operational and construction traffic away from these high-risk areas. In addition, the cost of the vehicle access through Rufus can be significantly reduced. The developer has analysed a road link and concluded it is not feasible. However, the analysis is flawed. The road does not need to be 8.5 metres wide. It does not need to run through the middle of the site. It does not need to be 20 miles an hour. Making the road narrower and designing it for lower speed will make it work, and none of these options were studied. The developer states that if alternative access route to Wellington via Dawlish is widened by 5.6 metres, to 5.6 metres, it will work for cars, pedestrians and cyclists. But if it works for Dawlish, why not Rufus? Please note that widening access from Dawlish does not work for Dawlish, as it would require knocking down our homes. The proposal should be rejected and redesigned for vehicle access through Rufus. Segregation. The pack agenda notes state that all affordable housing is still planned to be in Core D. This is social segregation and unacceptable. Social housing should be integrated and distributed throughout the development. Scale and mass. Scale, mass and height of the proposal is excessive and not in keeping with the surrounding areas. Merton's urban design officer has stated that the form and massing do not relate well to the adjacent development to the north, and the overall feel is of overdevelopment. Finally, urban greening. I also object on the basis of inadequate urban greening, which Merton Council has stated is essential for a development of this scale, and yet the proposal falls below the GLA minimum threshold. Note that the urban greening at the Earlsfield Place development by the same developer has actually involved installation of plastic grass in a pocket park, which is damaging to the environment. Height should be reduced and greening increased on elevated sections to improve local amenity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to take advice from officers. We've had 2 people asking to speak in favour. Is just one going to speak? Oh, the agent and the supporter, that's Ben Young and Stephen Sinclair, will share their time. They have the 6 minutes that Chris just had. Are they in the room or on Zoom? I'm not seeing anyone in the room, so I'm assuming they're on Zoom. So if it is Ben Young first, if you could start, and then when you're finished, it's just Ben Young. Okay, well then we'll start the timer again. You will have 6 minutes. You should maybe be able to see it on the screen, but this light will turn amber. And if you're on Zoom, maybe an officer will just remind you when you've got a minute to go. So do we have Ben? Oh yes, I can see on the Zoom.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
And we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So yes, we're sought to provide further clarity for you and your officers on the matters that were raised at the last committee. In respect of contamination identified on the site, we know that it is comprised part of an incandescent mantle works and a chemical works. Your committee report at paragraph 7.5.22 onwards identifies elevated levels of radiation, specifically in the northeast of the Rufus site. And we know that radioactive thorium is present. Our team undertook the remediation works on the adjacent Hazelmere site, and therefore we have all the knowledge and understanding to remediate the Rufus site to required standards. In respect of the cost of the remediation, your officers have now clearly directed you to the cost analysis submitted with our application, which has been independently assessed and agreed by your professional advisors at circa £1.8 million. The cost of identical work at the adjacent Hazelmere site are known to be £3.996 million. We're in no doubt that remediation of this contamination is necessary and that the costs of doing this are high, and that unfortunately there is no way of these being able to be passed on to previous owners, with any potential developer of this site having to take responsibility for contamination. The high costs of remediation are reflected in the level of affordable housing offered, and as a result, the 8 homes proposed are the maximum that can be delivered. There will be early and late stage review mechanisms to establish at the appropriate stages throughout the development whether the site can deliver any additional affordable homes. And we trust that these mechanisms reassure members that our affordable housing offer is open and transparent, and that we are committed to fully reviewing this as the development progresses. In a change to proposals since our last appearance, we can also now confirm that all of the affordable housing will now be delivered at London affordable rent with no shared ownership, at a cost to the developer of just under £490,000. Members also previously discussed pepper potting, and in response, we have spoken to the registered provider who will likely take the homes, who have written a letter which can be seen in your report pack. This confirms that to keep service charges and running costs to a minimum, a registered provider needs to keep tight control, and this is only possible with homes located in the same building. This is a position common to all providers. The letter also confirms that the zero carbon nature of the new homes will further help to reduce service charges, that the affordable housing building is closest to the blue badge parking spaces, and that the ground floor amenity space will be open to residents of both affordable and private buildings, promoting integration. We are proud to design the development to be tenure blind, and you will not be able to distinguish between private and affordable homes, with all of the buildings being designed to a high quality standard. Members also discussed previously about whether emergency vehicles could access all of the buildings within the development, and I can confirm that they absolutely can, and that there are no objections from statutory bodies that have been raised. The site is proposed for allocation in the draft new local plan for 90 to 106 new homes. We feel, as do your officers, that this is a high quality development that will provide energy efficient new homes and workspace on a brownfield site in a highly sustainable location, currently occupied by short-term tenants, that has very significant clean-up costs due to the radioactive contamination that goes back decades. These clean-up costs underpin the amount of affordable housing proposed, which will be assessed through a late-stage review to establish any further affordable homes can be delivered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that's the objectors and agent have spoken. So now we return to Tim to see if there's anything that was raised in those 2 contributions that he would like to specifically come back on.
Thank you, Chair. Lots of issues raised. I think in terms of the viability aspects, we have our independent assessor who has looked at this in detail. As part of that process, they have gone out as well to a company to review the costs, specifically the cost aspects of the proposal put forward within the applicant's viability. And that company is known as, I think in my report, Stuart's report is Porter. I can't recall the last bit of that name. But we have looked at it and it has been assessed. In terms of the affordable housing being in Block D, you will see that we we went back to the applicants and they've come back with a letter from the intended affordable housing provider to take on the block, who have outlined it is attractive to have it within one detached block. It should be noted they are the same affordable housing provider who have delivered on the adjacent site. So in terms of that aspect, really my advice this evening would be to remain it as is within Block D. In terms of access through to adjacent Wellington Works site, whilst there could be some merits in such a proposal, but we have to assess the application on its merits. There's no policy reason for putting through a vehicle access through to the adjacent site. The proposal does deliver on housing, and the applicants have put forward that in creating a vehicle access would result in the loss of units and also flood risk issues as well. But what is proposed is future-proofing pedestrian and cyclist access. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move to the contributions from members of the committee. First questions and then a debate, and then we'll move to a vote. I obviously cannot enforce asking councillors to keep to this, but I think it would be useful if we stuck to the reasons we deferred last time and the changes, because we gave this a good airing last time on all of those issues. And I think it would be useful if we tried to stick to those areas on which this report is different of the reasons we asked for deferral. So I'm seeing first councillors Christie, Draper, Southgate, Butler, in that order for questions.
Thank you, Chair. And you'll remember I obviously wasn't here at the last meeting due to COVID myself, so I didn't participate in that discussion. But you know, having read the follow-up information, I understand that this issue of having the affordable units in one block separate to the rest of the development was part of the reason for deferral. Now, I've read the letter that's come as an appendix to this report from the likely affordable housing provider, and it says it's imperative that service charges and other costs are kept to an absolute minimum to make the homes truly affordable. This is only possible if we can keep a tight control of the maintenance and operation of the building, which requires that all affordable homes are contained within the same building. And I don't know if I just don't understand that. I don't understand the logic of that. What is it that the residents in the block of affordable housing will not be getting? So just can the officer just explain that to me, because I don't understand the logic of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hoping the officer's taking notes, because we're going to take all 4 questions and then come back to answer them all. So Councillor Draper, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is actually on the contamination, and I'm a simple man. There are 3 figures shown in the report which are remarkably specific: £2,631,792, £2,427,437, and what looks like it might be from the adjoining site, a possible £1,812,332. They are very specific numbers. And then you go on to the business of the actual contamination itself, shown in paragraph 12.2, and all of it is that this site investigator identified relatively little contamination, but there's some evidence that at least a portion might be, and there's no measurement within building footprints or from soil samples has been undertaken to date. Limited evidence of on site of asbestos to date. In other words, nobody's actually sure what contamination there is and how you can, my question is, how can you get from really knowing absolutely nothing to be specific down to the last pound note? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to add an adjunct to that question, which the officers may be able to ask. If, as hinted at by Nick there and suggested by the objector, if the cost outrun in the end comes out as significantly lower than it's saying in this, do we then claw back more the SIL money or enforce more affordable housing on the block if that that cost does be shown to be significantly lower? But that's an add-on to next question. Councillor Southgate, Peter, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've received figures in the last couple of days about actual costs, which I know are dated the 16th of March. And can we take it that these figures were not known when we met a month ago? And they seem very large numbers. So, you know, in terms of their impact on the viability of the whole project, that's perhaps a question for the developers. But I just want confirmation that these are new and you know, we have to think about their significance.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Butler, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. I think that order has stolen my thunder somewhat, because they're all similar questions to mine, especially on your suggestion there, Chair, about the clawback. What options do we have there? The logic behind the one block over there. I'll just add just a question from me. In the plans here, it looks like the social housing block is designed slightly differently. Can you just explain to me the extent of that different design? If it is just superficial on the outside, then that's fine, but does it extend to the inside? And does that actually affect the logic that we also want to question on Councillor Christie's point?
Okay, thank you. We'll take one more. Councillor Henry Joan, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, on page 138 and the last paragraph, I don't really understand it. So if you could just explain some more, because it appears to be the test hasn't been done. You know, there are more tests to be done, and I'm quite concerned about the contamination, you know, degree, and you know, especially we're going through COVID, so we just want to know that, you know, whatever we're doing, you know, we're doing the right thing, not to damage people's health any further.
Okay, thank you. I've seen Councillor Alan Breaches wants to ask a question as well, but I'm going to go to the officers first. And just a quick sum up, we have I think 2 issues in all of those questions, 2.5. There's the separate block and various issues around that as design and the feasibility or not of doing the pepper pot, spreading social housing across, or affordable housing across the whole development. Then there's obviously the cost implications, mine, Nick's, and part of Ben's question, and Joan's question relates to that in terms of the pollution and other problems that could be on the site. So those 3 things, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to service charges within the affordable housing block, we are obviously not housing officers, but it would be to do with the services within the building itself. So, for example, if you had the affordable units pepper potted around with the market homes in those blocks, the service charges could be different because it takes into account the market housing and the lifts and the hallways. So we have to take it on face value what the affordable housing provider is saying in terms of service charges. In terms of the 3 figures in the committee report on contamination,
Well, I'm not sure we need to read over the exact figures again. I mean, Nick read them out, but the question was, how do we know that they're reliable? Councillor Southgate asked if they were recent, and I asked if they turn out to be lower, do we get more back in terms of either affordable housing or still money and clawback?
So In terms of the figures within the committee report itself, Chair, those are the ones that have always been with the application put forward. But in terms of what was submitted yesterday by the applicant to go to members was as part of the late stage review for the adjacent site, which is the Hazelmere Industrial Estate site. They've submitted the late stage review. As part of that, they have to submit their costs. So that's what they've done to assist members, just in demonstrating what the costs were on the adjacent site. So that's what to clarify, that's what those figures were that were sent round members yesterday. They weren't figures to do with this current application in terms of this current site. I mean, in terms of the costings, obviously it's been subject to investigative work, but what the applicants are telling us, they can't do intrusive investigative work because of the type of radiation that was found on the adjacent site, and it is shown to be just within the application site. In terms of the design of Block D, yes, it is different. The applicants have put forward to try and achieve as close as they can to zero carbon with that block. So, for example, that block does have triple glazing, and it will be run off its own independent energy supply, separate from the other blocks. And in terms of the further tests, Councillor Henry, to be drawn, that is quite a standard approach for when considering planning. So there will always be further remediation investigative work. And Chair, coming back to your point about the clawback, so yes, as part of the late stage review, should the cost not be as high as expected, then there would be clawback for affordable housing at that stage. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Lambrita, you had a question. Stephen.
Thank you. My question is about the 96 flats in all being dual aspect. Can officers just remind us what are the benefits of dual aspect as opposed to single aspect?
Benefits of dual aspect is really cross ventilation through the flats, and also increase in light and outlook, obviously with the path of the sun, going around the buildings. So I think generally the outlook and light and ventilation are the main benefits.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions, so we go to a debate and comments on the report and the application. Who do I see wants to speak? Councillor Crowe. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. At the February meeting, before we decided to defer, I spoke against this application. I didn't like it. I regret to say I still don't like it. Nothing I've heard so far this evening has persuaded me otherwise. I think it's an unneighbourly development, unneighbourly for the surrounding houses and streets for access point of view. I think its massing is too great. It will affect the skyline and the views from Donald Wreck. I don't like the fact that it's 55 of the 96 are one-bedroom flats when our policy about mix of housing is 1/3, 1/3. The affordable housing, 8 units, is, well, just unacceptable. We've been around the houses on that on several occasions. I don't like the idea that the affordable housing in its own separate block. I understand that the Housing Association may prefer that, but I'm not sure that's particularly relevant. I find it odd that they would have their own power supply. Everything about this application strikes me as slightly wrong and at variance with our policies. So I'm not inclined to support its approval. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Crowe. I'll take that as a proposal to refuse and see if there is a seconder, and there is. Okay, so we have a proposal on the table. Councillor Draper wants to speak next.
Yeah, I'm going to give a proposal to defer, Chair, I'm afraid, because I'm really conflicted over this one. I mean, we've got in front of us a chance to build 100 flats, and the flats, to me, look like they're pretty good flats. We've passed an awful lot worse before, But what that is, it's an opportunity as well. And according to the London plan, according to the wishes of the council, to build 40 affordable flats, which would be of real advantage to Merton, a real advantage to the people of Merton. But we have still in front of us a proposal for just 8 affordable flats. And I still genuinely do not understand why. And the reason I don't understand why is because we don't know anything about the viability appraisal other than these rather strange figures, and they genuinely are strange, getting down to the last pound for something which you're not even sure of. That's the only viability figure we have. Now, Greenwich, Southwark, Bristol, Brighton, Croydon, they all have public, open viability approvals. And when I was cabinet member for housing, I tried to push us to get that as well. And I clearly failed. And I have never felt more uncertain as a result of not being able to see that viability approval than I do at the moment. Now, I would love to see this come back with the full viability approval, appraisal, sorry, so that I can really understand why these developers really can only afford 8 flats on something of this size. I'm not certain of these figures. I can't see where they came from. I want to understand it better. And so I'm suggesting we defer again.
Councillor Alan Brutus, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I do like the number of flats proposed. I do like the dual aspect. I do like the design, but I feel that there is still something more to come from the developer. I want them to be more magnanimous, more forthcoming. I don't think we should reject. I agree with my colleague that we should defer and give them one more chance to come back to us with more information on viability, serious information from PA Housing about those comments they've made about a real benefit to affordable housing being in one place. We all, as councillors, do not like to see these segregated, separated areas, but if the housing provider there already can make a better, bigger case for us, addressing Councillor Christie's points, I do think it would be wrong for us to reject. I think a lot of work has gone into it. I think the objector has raised some issues that I'd like to see comments on paper from the developer. I think we should defer again.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Agreeing with the points already made, just to add that the evidence that is saying the cost of the clear up of the contamination is not good enough for me. It's not at all good enough for the small amount of proposed affordable homes. I want them to give us more information, and actually I'm voting with the deferral, but my comments to the developer would be to take this seriously, the suggestion of a clawback, conceding that they might get the cost of this contamination remediation wrong, and the right thing to do would be to put that directly into more affordable homes. So I want a more direct comment from them coming up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that I almost entirely agree with Councillor Crowe on, and everyone else who's mentioned the sort of social segregation and the paucity of the evidence, as Councillor Butler, Councillor Christie pointed out, on why it's different, why it would be cheaper, other than and the number of affordable housing. And I think I'm not here to defend the developers, but the developers might argue that we don't really know how much the clean-up cost is going to be until we start digging into the ground, and that can't happen until we've got planning permission. So we're in a kind of a bit of a Gordian knot there. But I think we're agreed as a committee, as I've heard what people are saying, that we're not going to pass this tonight. Our decision is whether we reject and send them back to the drawing board and we probably put another 6 months on the process, or we defer again for 1 or possibly 2 more meetings to basically say we were deferring for the same reasons as last time. And maybe we rushed it to bring it to this meeting because just 5 weeks later, we've come back and the information from what I'm hearing is not good enough. So our decision, I think, is reject or deferral. I had the proposal for rejection from Councillor Crowe first, so I'm going to take the vote on that. If that is passed, we reject. If that isn't passed, I'll take a second vote on whether we should defer. So hands up. There are, other than me, there are 8 members because the Liberal Democrat is missing this evening. So yes. An extra comment, sorry, from Tim.
Sorry, thank you. Members, just to clarify, the applicant's viability report has always been on the website since the application was submitted. So the details have always been up there for review. And Chair, you sort of summarised it in a nutshell there in terms of they have to put forward estimated cost within a viability report. They look at what are the estimated costs for everything, including sales of the flats and marketing and how long that takes. So that is true. They don't know the exact cost until they start digging into the ground. But what they have done to try and help demonstrate this to you is obviously submit the costings yesterday of the neighbouring site, which is the same developer, and what that shows in terms of the costings for site remediation. So really, Chair, just clarifying those points. I don't know, Chair, if you want me to comment on the deferral on those grounds, but I would advise against it because there's not much more the developer can submit to us.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. I think, councillors, I'm sorry, I can't take any more comments from outside the committee. I'll go with councillors Butler and then Draper. Sorry, that's Butler. That's Christie and then Butler. Billy.
Chair, we should all wear name badges. So, notwithstanding the points made about the viability assessments, on just back again on this issue of the segregation of the affordable, not social, affordable units that are proposed to be included. I still, Tim, in Tim's answer to my question, he more or less said the provider has said it would be more expensive and we take their word for that. And yet in the report, it says officers concur with the reasoning given by the housing associate or housing provider as to why they should be in a separate building. I don't understand it. I don't understand what the reasoning is other than the housing provider are saying that it would be easier or preferable.
Thank you.
So that is my outstanding issue. So if the developer were going to come back with more information, that is what I would want to see. I don't know whether that is plausible or not, or if they can come back with more information on that, but I believe there is still outstanding information that would help us.
Thank you. I think on that there is, I think, quite a strong suspicion amongst members that the late stage assessment may come back to show it hasn't been that expensive and they would need to provide either more SIL money or more social housing. The view, I think, of this committee would be that that should be actually more housing rather than just giving us some money to build elsewhere. Were that the case and the assessment went up by 2, 3, 4 properties, they would have to put some in some of the other blocks or change their designs and come back to us to build a bigger separate block, which I don't think we'd be very pleased with. So again, that's a contradiction within our discussions, really. But anyway, 2 more have asked to speak. Councillor Butler, Ben, and then Councillor Draper.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with your last point there. If we are, because I want to just, before we go for deferral, the reason I'm saying deferral is they haven't given us a detailed plan of a clawback, which I think we should be suggesting from this panel. I agree that if it turns out they do need to build more housing, then it would have to be in their current designs on more plots, which is fine with me. To go back to Councillor Draper's first point, I am conflicted on this because there are so many homes overall in the application. I want housing to be built. That's what makes these decisions really difficult. But at the moment, the evidence that they're bringing, the developers bringing, to why it would be so expensive to build more than a paltry 8 affordable homes in this development is not good enough. And if they do think it's good enough, then back it up with a plan that they'd be happy to claw back if their plan goes wrong. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I hope finally, and then we can move to the vote. Councillor Draper.
Yeah,
And briefly, I hope.
Mine was actually a very, very small point, and it was that I haven't looked at the developer's website. Mayor Max McCulper, but what I was actually voting on or not voting on was the report in front of me, and the report in front of me doesn't give the answers. And frankly, I want to trust our officers' reports rather than something that's come directly from the developer, because the developer will have put her own costs on that, and I don't blame them for it. That's the way that capitalism works. But what I actually want is what it is, as close as possible, what it is actually going to cost, what that viability assessment, appraisal, whatever, really was. Thanks.
Thank you. I had suggested earlier we would go for a vote first on deferral and then first on rejection and then for deferral. But having heard the debate, I think it might save us a vote because from people's contributions, I maybe expect this first vote to pass, which is a deferral to a future meeting. If that vote fails, we can then have a vote on altogether rejection. But it seems from contributions so far that looks like it may be the will of the committee, but we shall see in an actual vote. So I need hands up in favour of deferring to a future meeting. That's all 8. For the reasons explained, which will be reflected in the minutes. It's 8 to 1 not voting myself. So that's in effect unanimously deferred to a future meeting. Thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda, as I explained, the order we were going to do it is in item number 9, which is Bennett's Courtyard in the marvellous ward of Collieswood. And again, for people at home or in the building, we have 2 objectors to speak, who will get 3 minutes each, and then an agent for up to the 6 minutes, which is the total of those 3 minutes. But first, we hear from Stuart Adams, the officer, to present his report. Stuart, where you go.
Thank you, Chair. The item before members is the application for Bennett's Courtyard, which is on Watermill Way in Collieswood. As you will see from the report, the application is back before members of the Planning Committee. I'll just quickly touch on what the application is for. So the application is for extensions to the existing buildings here on Bennett's Court with a rooftop extension to create 15 new flats. So in terms of, I'll just quickly move through the site plan just to give it a bit of context. So the Bennett's Courtyard is here, 3 blocks. To the south is Runnymede. To the north of the site is Merton Mills, and then to the east, the west is Vista House. The application site is located in the Wandle Valley Conservation Area, and the existing buildings on the site, Bennett's Courts, are locally listed. As you will see from the committee report, the reason why the application is back before members of the committee, you may recall that committee made a decision on the 19th of June last year. This is following the approval of the application and a High Court of Justice judicial review, whereby the decision was that the original decision needs to be quashed. The reason for that was the omission of the conservation area's comments in the committee report. So just to clarify, the case officers was aware of the conservation area's comments when making the recommendation for committee. However, the error was that those comments were not formed part of the committee report, so members could see those comments. So in effect, that decision has been quashed and it's back before members to be reconsidered. So I'll just go through some of the points in terms of the committee report. There are the reasons why it's back to committees is outlined in the introduction section of the report. In that section, the councillors, conservation officers' comments are in full for members' consideration. In addition, there are some additional information in the mod sheet for members' attention in terms of the location of listed buildings, etc., in the locality. So I will identify those listed buildings and give you a bit of context to the application. I'm just going to move through the slides now. So this is the ground floor plan, proposed plan. There are no changes as per se. The only changes at ground floor level are the introduction of some bike stores and cycle storage to accommodate the 15 new flats. As we move up towards the top of the building, the cores will be increased in height to accommodate the new flats. So this is the floor plans of the proposed new flats. There are, as I said, 15 new flats proposed. There's a good majority of dual aspect units here. There's only 4 single aspect units. This is just a roof plan showing the development. To the north is Merton Abbey Mills, which is the historical core of the conservation area. So just moving through some of the elevations, the south elevation here is the rear elevation. So the proposal is for the extensions above the existing building, which is along here. The northern elevation, which faces Merton Abbey Mills, is the elevation here. We've got the extension to the existing building to create the 15 flats. The elevation here is a northeast elevation. You've got Merton Abbey Mills here on the right-hand side. Again, just showing the proposed extension. So this elevation here is a cross section showing the development. There's a first floor communal garden area which all the flats will have access to. On the right-hand side is the historic core of Merton Abbey Mills. Again, here from the west elevation shows the proposed extensions, and here on the left-hand side is Merton Abbey Mills and the William Morris Public House. This is just a close-up of the western elevation showing the proposed extensions. So just moving to the proposed massing. So the dark grey on the screen here is the proposed additional floors. Merton Abbey Mills is here. This one shows it from Runnymede, the additional floors. You can see in the context the larger buildings here, which are actually outside the conservation area, and the lower sort of historical core buildings are 1 or 2 stories in Merton Abbey Mills. So in terms of the actual treatment of the proposed extension, there will be a continuation of the louvres and also the window details to match the existing buildings. The key change in terms of the top floor will be the light grey zinc panelling, which is here. So this is quite a useful illustration for member consideration, showing existing arrangement and the proposed extensions here. Again, another illustration taken from inside Merton Abbey Mills, the existing situation and that proposed. So this is just a view showing the context of the site in terms of Merton Abbey Mills. As I said before, this area here is within the conservation area. These buildings along here, the larger buildings, are actually outside the conservation area. So in terms of listed buildings and relationship of the proposed extension to listed buildings, as I said before, Bennett's Courtyard is actually listed itself, locally listed. In terms of statutory listed buildings, the 2 pink dots here indicate the statutory listed buildings, all these other buildings in Merton Mills are locally listed. Again, so this is just an extract from the character appraisal of the area. The application site is here. It shows Merton Priory's scheduled monuments and also the listed buildings on the site. So just moving towards some site photographs, the application site is here. And on the right-hand side is Merton Abbey Mills. All these buildings here are in the conservation area, and these buildings here on the left-hand side actually fall outside the conservation area. Again, another photograph showing the application site and Merton Abbey Mills here on the right-hand side. A similar photograph. And these are just photographs from within Merton Abbey Mills itself, showing the proposed building, and some various photographs showing the rear of the building. So just to wrap that up, that's a CGI showing obviously the proposed building. The key consideration for members is the scheme needs to be reconsidered following the question of the original decision. The key test really for members to consider is whether the proposal preserves the character or appearance of the conservation and listed buildings. That would be the minimum requirement for consideration in terms of policy. So that will be the key consideration for members compared to the other scheme. You do still need to consider all aspects of the scheme, but those were the reasons why the decision was quashed, because of the conservation areas comments were not included in the report, but they are now included for the report for members' consideration. So the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions in section 106 as before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And before we go on to the two objectors and then the agent, I think I want to make it absolutely clear that the omission of the conservation officer's comments at the last meeting when we decided this, which was the reason that went to court and was quashed, and we have to take it to reconsider this entire application. It was an administrative error by officers within the planning department. And as chair of the planning department, I take responsibility for that. It was a mistake and an error. Any suggestion that it was done in some way deliberately to try and force the committee's hand or force through this application is absolutely erroneous. And I won't have it repeated in this committee, although it has been suggested elsewhere, and I don't want to hear it. It's not true. Having said that, we'll move on to the objectors. Philip Pratt, who I believe we heard from last time, are you in the room?
I am in the room.
You are. And Sally Lyons, you're in the room as well. So we'll time you at 3 minutes each. So, and if assuming Philip is going first, go ahead. And this will turn amber when you have a minute to go.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. It is the stuff of movies to be able to revisit a decision that you've taken and to think again about it. Just to remind the members of the committee, it's the same committee, the same members. Last time it was a close vote, 5-4, but that doesn't matter because, as Churchill said, a majority of one suffices. However, there are things which the committee need to look at. And I, for my part, wouldn't suggest it was anything other than administrative error. I would comment, though, that the Conservation Officer's comments are still not uploaded to the public part of the planning portal website of the council. It's important to consider these things. It's important to put them in context. Your Conservation Officer advised that she did not feel that the proposed additional floor is an enhancement to the existing building, and went on to comment that Bennett's Courtyard is a well-designed development which complements its historical industrial location. The contrasting materials do not embellish these buildings, but detract from them. So she isn't unsupportive, she's actually critical. She's saying it detracts. And that's important because I want to cascade down through the 3 levels of policy. The NPPF, which members of the committee will be familiar with, it says in relation to heritage assets, when considering the impact of a proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, in this case, that's the conservation area, great weight should be given. So it's not an even contest, great weight has to be attached to it. And it goes on to say that any harm should require clear and convincing justification. And I'm just going to pull members up there and remind them that this is a scheme of 15 quite small flats with no on-site affordable housing, enough of a contribution towards affordable housing to buy about a quarter of one unit, and a third of the units being single aspect. In that context, your own policies in your core strategy require, in the Wandle Valley, development to conserve and enhance. That's policy CS5. Policy CS14, design, requires development to conserve and enhance heritage assets. And policy in the London Borough Merton Sites and Policies Plan, DMD2, likewise requires enhancement, as does DMD4. And as indeed do the specific policies in the Wandle Valley Conservation Area. Your officers in their report to this committee suggest that preserving is sufficient. I'm suggesting it's not, that there is a policy requirement for enhancement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Philip. And secondly, for the second lot of 3 minutes is Sally, who's also in the room. Go ahead, Sally. And again, this will turn amber when you've got a minute to go.
Up and over 250-page High Court judicial review that ruled the last vote unlawful and decision quashed. In case there's any downplaying of its significance, freedom of information request shows there's been no other successful JRs quashing this council's planning decisions in the last 5 years, and it may be much longer. The council's lawyers claimed in their initial response all grounds were without merit, wholly unarguable, would be resisted in court and legal costs recouped. Instead, ground 1 was conceded and the unlawful decision quashed. Grounds 2 and 3 were therefore academic and not tested in court. The council's own lawyers stressed you can't get a decision quashed on a legal technicality, and indeed you cannot. They did not recoup their costs and had to pay hours. That's £10,750 of taxpayers' money. Last time you, the voting committee, did not have the conservation officers' views to work with. The officers' report is still disingenuous, I feel. I do not agree the CO's words are verbatim. They were encased in an email of the 8th of June, revealing they were offered over 6 months into the live application, and they only came to light thanks to legal disclosure. You may wonder how an application recommended for approval, which is so entirely bound up in conservation and heritage issues, could be presented to the committee, omitting the views of the conservation officer. Fortunately, this time you have her views, which are the same as the Wandle Valley forums. It would again be disingenuous to downplay the legal weight of her views. You, the voters, must make up your own minds of their significance. The Listed Buildings and Conservation Area Act states special regard must be given to the desirability of preserving a building, its setting, or any features of special architectural interest. Not equal regard, special regard. They are exempt from PDR airspace rules, and it's not right airspace developments be ushered in by stealth. Heritage special considerations take precedence over other considerations. The heritage legal framework protects conservation areas. If a bespoke, sympathetically designed, architectural award-winning, locally listed building set amid some of the borough's oldest listed buildings in the Wandle Valley Conservation Area, adjacent to the river and green corridor and site of nature conservation importance within the Merton Priory Archaeological Priority Zone and exempt from PDR rooftop rights, is not protected by heritage planning law, then heritage planning law is surely dead and conservation areas are set for destruction. The Conservation Officer found the development does not preserve or enhance, but detracts and mars. Your own policies require developments to enhance. There will be harm which will be permanent and irreversible. This time you have the Conservation Officer's views to fit within the special regard that law requires. The unlawful quash vote was 5-4 in favour. Heritage law requires rejection and that you vote against approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Sally. The agent, John Murch, are you in the building or on Zoom? I'm presuming on Zoom.
It's not John Murch. My name is Paul Tucker. I'm a barrister instructed by Mr. Murch.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Go ahead. You have up to a maximum of 6 minutes. And as you're on Zoom, somebody, I think an officer will remind you when you have a minute to go if you need to use that time. Go ahead, we can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I'm going to use all of those 6 minutes. Thank you for the opportunity. It's extraordinarily unusual for a barrister to address a planning committee, let alone a QC. And I've been asked to do that given the unusual circumstances of this particular application. So my name is Paul Tucker. I'm head of chambers at King's Chambers, asked specifically to address the committee and to assure the committee that the report has been through the scrutiny of lawyers on behalf of the applicant behind the scenes. And that's particularly in the light of the High Court challenge. The application is obviously before you again for the reasons set out in the report, and to ensure that the views of the Conservation Officer have been properly brought to your attention. They have. They've been quoted in full, and it's important that you understand exactly what they say. What the Conservation Officer does in two very short paragraphs, in the first is to address the conservation area, and in the second to address the effect on the building itself upon which the extensions will go. There is criticism. It said that there'll be a detraction from the simple industrial lines of the Bennett Courtyard buildings. But in terms of the conservation area, what the officer says is that there wouldn't be an enhancement. Why is that important? It's important because of paragraph 1.5 of the report, which quotes the statutory test in relation to conservation areas, which is section 72, which requires you to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing, and that's the statutory test which you have to have regard to. In relation to this, officers have concluded that there is a neutral effect in relation to the heritage assets, and in those circumstances that there would be the meeting of the statutory test. If they concluded that there was harm, you would indeed have to give great weight to that. That's paragraph 199 of MPPF, which also refers to preserving or enhancing the significance of conservation areas. So in terms of the test, officers have set out the right test, officers have set out the full views of the Conservation Officer, and officers have also formed their own view on the basis of that information as to whether there would be harm to the heritage assets, and have concluded that there wouldn't, and have therefore given you a clear recommendation. The report properly addresses the reasons why the decision was quashed on the last occasion by agreement, and importantly, it was only ground one on which it was quashed, which was the failure to report the Conservation Officer's recommendations, and that's also addressed in the report. So we are here in unusual circumstances, but nonetheless the substantive merits of the case remain, and the substantive merits of the case are very similar to those which previously led this particular committee to resolve to grant approval in those circumstances. So it's the balancing exercises which is important, and we say that's been done. This is a site which is within a growth area that's expected to develop a significant quantum of new homes over the coming years. That includes by making more efficient use of land, which is exactly what this proposal does. So in those circumstances, the correct approach is to revisit the resolution that was made last time, reconsider it in the light of the information from the Conservation Officer, but read that very carefully indeed, because it doesn't say quite what the objectives have just said. And in those circumstances, we say that the council's growth objectives can be delivered whilst protecting the heritage of the borough and those parts which are sensitive to change. In those circumstances, the scheme remains the same as it was before, including the enhanced level of affordable housing which has been offered by the applicant, and my clients would respectfully invite members to uphold the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you very much indeed. This may be one of those rare occasions where a barrister comes in under time.
Thank you very much for that. Before I go back to the officer for comments, I've got a few things just on the way the committee will deal with this. The previous application we had before us, we had discussed once in committee and then deferred and discussed again. And so my advice that time was try not to go over what we'd discussed the first meeting, because we'd given it a full discussion. The planning law side of this one is the first decision and the entire discussion has been quashed. So you are free to have the full discussion again. Although I think we are likely to concentrate on the Conservation Officer's comments. And I don't want to get into a hierarchy of members of the legal profession, but I think it's going to hinge on this. The solicitor in the room suggested that it must preserve and enhance the conservation area. The barrister on Zoom suggests that it must preserve or enhance. And there's that difference between the use of the word and or, which I'm hoping would be my first question to the planning officer on this. But first, in if there's anything specific in the contributions you heard that you want to come back on, and then we'll move to questions, and that will be my first question.
Just one point really. The officer's view on that point is it needs to preserve or enhance. So it doesn't have to enhance. That answers probably everybody's question on that point.
Okay, can I open it to the floor for questions on the content of the report? I see councillors Alan Breaches, Southgate and Latif in that order, then Draper. So councillor Alan Breaches, Stephen first.
Question to officers. As per paragraph 1.7 on page 214, can they confirm that the comments of the council's conservation area officer were known to officers when they came up with the recommendation to approve, that they had known about the conservation officer's comments, but still went on to recommend that we approve, and that, as the chair has said, it was a mere administrative error in not including the conservation officer's report. We are guided by the officers here in the main, aren't we? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take all four and then come back to you if that's all right, Stuart. So I think Councillor Southgate, you wanted to ask a question. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. In reference to the same paragraph, in fact, as Councillor Breaches has just referenced, comments of the conservation officer were removed from the report so as not to send mixed messages to members. In hindsight, this was an error. Was it an administrative error? It sounds to me more like a decision to omit those comments, which was an extraordinary decision, actually, because I think we're used to having the conservation officer's comments, which may well be at variance to the planning officers. So we should have been left to make that judgment, I think. But I don't know if, Chair, you want to comment on just administrative error? Or
I will come in on that one specifically. Yes, it was administrative error. Yes, that statement was made by an officer and should have been overruled by a more senior officer knowing planning law, who should have said, you can't do that, and we must put it in. So in that way, I'm saying it's an administrative error in that the error by the officer wasn't picked up by somebody senior or myself. Maybe I should have seen it in the report and said, where is it? So myself and the senior members of the planning department were taking responsibility for this, and it's an error that should have been picked up. I'll take the final two questions and then go back. So Councillor Latif.
Thank you, Chair. I think my questions have been asked by Councillor Alan Breaches and Councillor Southgate, but on page 212 of the report, under the officer's response to the conservation officer, it says that officers do not disagree with that observation. However, as required by planning policy, there is no requirement to enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. So is that correct? Or
that goes back to the discussion we just had about whether it needs to, and the officers have said it is the word or. So an application can be acceptable if it either preserves or enhances, so that if it only preserves and does not enhance, it is at least preserving, and we could pass this. I'm not saying we should on those grounds, but it's only if it is detrimental or is a denigration to the conservation area that we would have to give a lot of weight to that in terms of whether to approve or not. A neutral, it preserves, without saying that it does enhance, is acceptable under our policies and under planning law. Councillor Draper, Nick, you have a question.
Yeah, I don't think I was here for the original decision, so I feel entitled to ask this. First one is a bit blooming predictable, given what I was talking about the last item. There should be one affordable flat amongst these. There is no rationale as to why that can't be done. All it says is that you're going to give they're going to give 70,000 quid towards something or other. I'd like to see the figures. That's number one. Number two, and this is really I don't understand. In what way does this preserve what's already there, the area that's already there? And if it doesn't preserve it, in what way does it enhance it? Because I have to confess that I feel it does neither.
Okay, I'm going to deal with the second part. We have obviously had a number of discussions about this. It's not a question of whether it preserves the building, it's whether it preserves or enhances or is denigration, or it detracts from the conservation area. So, and it's a judgment call for officers and will be for us when we come to votes of whether we think this extra floor on top of this building, we can say, does it detract from the conservation area as a whole, not from the building specifically? Does it preserve it? Pretty much we're saying, oh, it's just about the same as it is now. It's not detrimental or enhancing, or does it enhance? Officers aren't arguing that it enhances the area. The advice is that they would say that it preserves the area. So I'm hoping those discussions on the conservation area and that have been dealt by me from the chair, so that I can hand back to Stuart on the one other issue that Councillor Draper raised, which is the amount of affordable housing in there.
Yes, in terms of the affordable housing, as part of the application, the applicant would have been required to submit a viability report with the application. That report would then be independently assessed by the council's viability assessor. And during those discussions between the two parties, the officers would take the advice of our independent assessor whether or not the level of affordable housing is the maximum that can be delivered. And that was the outcome of those discussions. So the viability was subject to independent review from the council's independent assessor.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I have one more question so far. Councillor Christie, Billy.
Thank you, Chair. Can the officers comment on the amount or the proportion of proposed flats that would be single aspect properties? You know, we had reference in the previous item to the benefits of dual aspect versus single aspect properties, but could you just, if you can, let me know how the proposals for this additional floor compares to the proportion of single aspect properties in the existing building?
Okay, thank you.
Fortunately, I don't have those details of the number of dual aspects in the existing building, but there are quite a high number of dual aspect units in the proposed development. In terms of, I think from memory, there's 4 single aspect units and all the rest would be dual aspects. And obviously, as we said before, the main positive aspects of dual aspect is ventilation in the flat itself, and also different outlook from different parts of the building.
Thank you. I'm just looking through the plans to see whether, obviously we have plans for the proposed additional floor. Do our floor plans included in our pack include the floor plans for the existing floors? I mean, we won't be able to get a number, but at the moment it's 4 out of the proposed new 12 would be single aspect. We won't be able to go through every floor plan, but we might be able to look and get an idea. It looks as if well, I'm not sure whether I'm looking at the right part of the plans, but it looks like there are quite a few single aspect flats. The ones on the corner will have a window side and front, but the ones in the middle look like they're single aspect. So it looks like the rest of the development has about a third. I can't be sure of that, and I'm not sure we'll be able to come up with a definitive, certainly not a definitive number or even much guidance on that. That would be my best guess, yes. I'm not seeing any other hands up for questions, so we'll go on to the debate and comments on the report and the recommendation in front of us. And I'm seeing, I'll go in this order as I saw the hands go up: Alan Bretis, Crowe, Southgate, Draper. Okay, in that order. So Councillor Alan Bretis, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I do believe that colleagues should vote for this application now that we have been through the issues with regard to the error that has now been corrected, and we should be reminded of the recommendation by officers who were privy to the conservation areas comments, but still felt, given their expertise, qualifications, subscriptions, that it was in order to grant permission subject to the conditions of Section 106 legal agreement. I do believe that we've had a good discussion. We've respected the judicial review. We've had comments from solicitors, barristers. I think the clearest possible route forward is to agree to this application as per our officer's recommendation. That's clear and forward thinking in terms of adding additional housing units within this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And that's in line with the officer's recommendation, and I'll take that as a proposal to approve the officer's recommendation. But we'll carry on with comments. Councillor Crowe, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier we saw a map of the area and it identified a number of locally listed buildings and some statutory listed buildings within the conservation area. It's my judgment that this additional floor on Bennett's Court detracts from the conservation area. People within the conservation area looking at Bennett's Court, if it had this additional floor on, I think the whole impression created would be one of detraction. So I think we must refuse this application.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I move to the next two, I've been advised that the planning officer with responsibility for this, Mr. Tim Lipscomb, has something he wants to clarify. He's joining us on Zoom. So there he is. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to step in to provide some clarification on the previous decision. Now, this was a decision made under a different management structure at the council. You'll note that new team leader and new head of DC have since been appointed. I just want to make it clear that this wasn't an officer mistake in isolation. This was an intended route. The first draft of my report indeed included the conservation officer's comments. On review of that by the management team, there was an indication that the conservation area officer's comments should be amalgamated into the overall officer recommendation rather than reported independently. And that's the reason that they weren't included. I happen to agree that they should be included, and I think the judicial review has clearly indicated that they should be included, and we will be looking to include them in full going forwards. But I just wanted to set out the process and what led us to the point of not including the conservation officer's comments in that report. And I've nothing further to add. The only thing I was going to come back on, since I've happened to be fairly familiar with the scheme and the site, the reason the layout includes single aspect units is because it follows on from the layouts of floors below. The construction of the building involves a central glazed atrium, which means that securing dual aspect is more difficult because it has to follow on from the layouts below. Hopefully that will assist members in their decision making. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Tim. Okay, carry on with the councillors' comments. Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to Mr. Lipscomb for his clarification there. My view very much in line with Councillor Crowe. So the award-winning Bennett's Courtyard is a 4-storey block of flats at present. And just from what was put up on the screen earlier, if you add a story to it, and this is the conservation officer's point too, is that you do detract from that unity. It does just not look as good with that floor added. So you can't argue that it doesn't preserve the unity. It detracts from it, and it does affect the views from the the cluster of historical buildings in the conservation area. So it does not meet that test, in fact, of either preserving or enhancing. In my view, it does detract. And that is the reason to refuse.
Thank you very much, Peter. Councillor Draper, Nick.
Yes, thanks, Chair. These flats were built before I became a councillor, but while I was living in Collier's Wood, and when they first came up, I thought I was very nervous about them. I didn't think that they would be remotely pretty, and unlike Vista Prospect and Independence House, which are hideous, and which I think we've actually voted to increase the flooring on at least one of them already. This is a really rather not just pretty but rather remarkable development. At first sight it's blocky, but then when you come to realize its relationship with the river and everything like that, you realize exactly why it is the height it is, why it is made of the materials that it is, and it fits, it works. There's no other way of saying it. It fits with the mills as they stand. Now, you said it's a judgment call. And unfortunately, it is just that. As far as I'm concerned, it's a judgment call. This extra floor in the materials that it's shown, you know, with the design that it's got, does not enhance that original award-winning. That's really important. I don't think anybody's actually said this. When Bennett's Courtyard came in, it actually won awards, or at least one national award, that is. It doesn't enhance that, and in my view, it does detract from it. And it certainly doesn't preserve what you've got already. I think it lessens what you've got already. Now, from that point of view, I can't see how I can vote for this. The devil in me was going to say, well, actually, we haven't got proper things on the affordable flat, and we could defer on that basis, just as I did with the last one. But I don't think it deserves that. I think I'm going to have to vote against it, and I'm very, very sorry.
Thank you, Nick. Just on one of your points about the nearby blocks that have had an extra story put on top, that was under the prior approvals process that the government brought in, which allows, with planning committees having much less power to stop that, which applies to those blocks nearby which aren't in the conservation area. If it's in the conservation area, it does need full planning permission, and the prior approval process doesn't work. And that's why we are considering full planning permission rather than a prior approval on this. Now, I'm not seeing anyone else. So it is the discussion we've been having. If you believe that this proposed extension either preserves or enhances the conservation area, you vote in favour of this application, unless you have another reason to vote against. But I'm not hearing much of that. If you believe that putting an extra story on this block detracts from the conservation area, and as I've got to repeat, not the building itself, but the area as a whole, then you should vote against. But as Councillor Alamberitis went first, suggesting that we should accept the officer's recommendation to grant planning permission for that, that is what I will put to the vote. And so I'm seeing anyone else want to add to that. So all those in favour of granting planning permission? I'm seeing 3. All those against? 5. That's 3 to 5 of the 8, with myself not voting, and as I said earlier, the Liberal Democrat missing. So we have rejected agenda item 9. Thank you for that so far. We are an hour and a half in. We've done 2 of the 6, but we've done the 2, I think, which is going to take the longest. So I'm going to give us a 10 minutes at most break. We will return at 9 o'clock on the dot. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application is 26 Harewood Road in Colliers Wood. The application site is here. Just to give you a general overview of the area and what the proposal is for. So the proposal is conversion of the property into 3 flats. The properties in the area are generally 2-storey housing. The application site forms part of a pair of semi-detached properties. So as part of the proposal, there is a 1-storey rear extension and also a mansard roof extension. So if I just go through some of the site photos quickly, this is a view taken from the application site, first floor, and on the right-hand side is 24 Harewood Road. As you can see here, they have a 1-storey side stroke rear extension. So this is a photograph from the front of the property. This is the application site here, as I said, part of a pair of semi-detached properties. This application site here, I will come on to this later, but in terms of the split of the rear garden will split into 3 to provide private amenity space for each of the flats. So the top 2 floor flats will access the garden via this existing side passageway. So this is a photograph of the rear of the property showing the application site, 24 Harewood Road here and 28 on this side. Photograph again from the application site towards the rear garden, showing the long depth of the rear garden. Again, another one showing from the first floor level, showing the outbuilding in the rear garden, number 28. So in terms moving towards the plans, the application site is outlined here in red. As this plan shows, quite a long rear garden. So this is a proposed block plan. The blue areas are showing the proposed extensions. So there's a roof extension here and also a 1-storey side stroke rear extension. As you'll see from this plan here, the 1-storey side stroke rear extension is set off the boundary of the neighbour on this side and only projects a minimal distance beyond number 28. So moving to the floor plans, this is a roof plan just showing the split of the rear garden into 3. So the ground floor flat, which is the 3-bedroom flat, would have direct access to the rear garden here. And as I said before, the 2 upper floor flats, which are the 1-bedroom flats, would access the rear garden via this walkway along the side, and each would have their own rear garden, and cycle space will be provided within each garden. Moving to the floor plan, so this is the ground floor plan here. So as you will see, this is a 3-bedroom flat. The accommodation here is considered to be good standard of accommodation with reasonable levels of outlook and light. As part of the conversion of the property into flats, if this was considered to be a house originally, there is some debate whether or not the house is originally a house or flats, but as part of the conversion, you are required to get a 3-bedroom flat back in the conversion, which the proposal provides. Bin storage is provided at the front and the side of the property. Moving up to the first floor plan, this is a 1-bedroom flat. All the flats meet minimum room sizes and GIA standards. Moving up to the roof accommodation, this is the smaller flat, 1-bedroom flat here. So just turning to some of the extensions, as I said, there's a 1-storey rear extension. The extension is modest in size. It has a slightly unusual roof form, but nevertheless, obviously consider that the extension is in keeping with the property. At roof level, the proposal would provide a mansard roof extension, which projects approximately halfway down the rear wing. Officers consider this to be a good design for the type of property, whereby it respects the original 2-storey rear wing. Also, as part of the amendments to the scheme, the roof extension was lowered in height, so there was no increase in height at the ridge level, which is a previous criticism of a previous refusal on the site. And this is just some cross sections showing the proposal and also the rear garden. So in conclusion, officers are happy with the scheme. The proposal will retain a 3-bedroom flat on the site and also provide 2 additional units on the floors above, helping meet Merton's housing targets. The extensions are considerably in keeping with the existing property and surrounding area. In terms of highways, the decision would be subject to a legal agreement which would restrict the upper 4 flats from obtaining car parking permits. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions in section 06. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The speakers on this, we have one objector. The agent who would have spoken in favour isn't going to be able to make it. So we have one objector, and then we have Ward Tory Councillor Atawar, who will speak on the application as well. But first, the objector, which is Paul Brent. Can you let me know if I can't see anyone in the room, so I'm assuming you're on Zoom. Yes, there you are.
Yeah.
Paul, you will have 3 minutes, and an officer will remind you when you have a minute to go.
There should actually be two objectors on this point. There's the two of us made a representation to you to object to this this extension.
Correct. The one other has, I think, more recently told us they cannot now make it. So it's just you.
No, he's here.
I'm here.
Derek.
Yeah, I'm here. I never sent a message saying that at all.
Okay, there's been a miscommunication there. So we do have two objectors who have 3 minutes each. But I'm going to take Paul first. So
thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm representing several local residents, and we're objecting to proposal planning application number 26 on the following grounds. Point one, the first application was refused on the grounds that the the ground floor flat failed to meet the minimum standards of single bed. The only change to this plan has been an addition of a corridor to bedroom number one. A corridor is a means of access to a space and not a living area. This does not provide any additional living space and does not make the living area any less cramped. Point two, there are no other examples of this type of conversion in Harewood Road. The proposed division of the existing gardening into 3 small separate gardens would be out of character, and this could set an undesirable precedent. Point three, I believe the proposed ceiling height in the main living area of flat 2 falls below the minimum 2.3 metres standard set out in the nationally described standard space. Point four, the planning department refers to the national planning policy framework. It states it is especially important that the developments make optimal use of the potential of each site. I do not believe the current plan provides this. I believe the optimal and most flexible use of the site would be 2 flats, 1 3-bedroom flat and 1 2-bedroom flat. This would allow both units to be used by families and would not limit one of the dwellings to a single occupant dwelling. It would provide better quality and more spacious accommodation. Furthermore, it would remove the need to subdivide the gardens into 3 units and would not require a dormer over the outrigger and decreasing the ceiling heights. Point 5, I have written to the planning department on 2 occasions pointing out that the border between myself and number 26 is incorrectly drawn. I do not understand how the plans can be approved with this clear error. Point 6, the submitted drawings show the side axis being used to store refuse and recycling bins. Their intention is to stack the food waste bin and dry recycling on top of this using a shelving system. With a border drawn in the correct location, the remaining space will be significantly decreased. All the pedestrian traffic to the gardens, including the access to the bike storage, would have to go past this narrow point. The same shelving system is proposed in the front garden, which would be much higher than the current front wall and would not be in keeping with the street scene. Point 8, there are numerous inconsistencies in areas within the calculations for flat 3. I've highlighted some of these in the handouts that I sent to you, and they're in figures C, D and E. Point 9, the amended elevation drawing in flat 3 shows an inconsistency with the amended plan drawing. The plan drawing shows the dormer being longer and having a larger floor area than the elevation. This is another mistake, making it impossible to correctly calculate the floor area. Point 10, and my final point, if the development does not include a 3rd flat, a condition should be added to the planning permission to prevent the property from being sold or rented as a 2-person accommodation at any future date. I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to make my representation.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Derek Lomas is next, and you will have a similar 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Derek Lomas. I live with my wife and family at number 28, next door to the proposed development. I've had comments from a majority of people living in the road, and they all seem to agree that this development of 3 flats is based on pure greed to get maximum return for minimum size living. No other houses in Harewood Road have been developed to this extreme extent. If agreed, this development will set a precedent for out of character, overcrowded, multi-occupancy flats that have bare minimum space to live. A developer at number 34 Harewood is waiting for this case to be agreed so that he can add more rooms to his already badly built extensions. As the council knows, the development at 34 was refused for the same reasons we are requesting now. The plans are mathematically wrong incorrect boundaries, square metre measurements of rooms don't add up, gardens botched into 3 with insufficient access past refuse bins that block access. With special regard to the 3rd floor flat, if the plans are to be believed, the proposed development involves destroying my chimney. I had no request from the developer regarding this. No notice of the planning was ever posted in the road. At the minute, there is rubbish strewn all over the front garden, which has been left for weeks, which doesn't bode very well for considerate building. My last point is, I know the council does not deal, as I understand it, with sewage in planning, but an easily possible 9 people could be in this development, and that is a big burden to place on an already overladen system. Dyno Rod have been called 4 times in the last 12 months to the road to clear blockages. I asked the council to refuse permission for 3 flats. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I have been advised, contrary to what I said earlier, that the agent has now joined the Zoom call. That is a Mr. Nigel Coleman. So Nigel, you will have up to 6 minutes, which is the 2 lots of 3 minutes the objectors have just taken. So Nigel, are you there on the Zoom?
Hi there. Apologies, it's not actually Nigel. My name's David. I'm the applicant rather than my architect, which is Nigel.
Okay, with the unfortunate namesake.
Yes.
David,
yes.
go ahead.
So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. So we've worked quite hard with the planning officers on this site over the last few months to try and mitigate some of the concerns they had with the original application. And what we've arrived at, in my view, is a conservative application to reinstate a property into its proper usage. It's been vacant for a little while, into 3 units to help Merton meet its targets, but also to ensure that what we're designing and building is conservative for the local neighbourhood and neighbours. In terms of massing and extensions, what we've put in place, as Stuart kindly pointed out, it is actually very conservative. The mansard roof extension is very similar to what can be put in place through permitted development. And the rear extension, as can be shown in the floor plans, is actually a very minimal extension to the rear elevation already in place. And we've also looked to meet all of the space standards as per the planning policy of Merton in design of the floor plans and the layouts. And therefore, I would hope, as the planning officers recommended, that the application is put through.
What about the room on that mess? That's correct. You didn't say much, did you really? Oh, hello. You get to go.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. We have finally Councillor Lakshmi Atawar, one of my colleagues in Colliers-Wood, to speak on the application for up to 3 minutes. Lakshmi, go ahead.
Right. Thank you. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the residents of Harewood Road against the planning application for developing 26 Harewood Road into 3 flats. One 3-bed, 2 1-bed flat, and 1 1-bed. The previous speakers who objected against it, I thought, spoke quite eloquently, setting out their reasons why they do not want this development. And it's not because they're against developments per se. I do believe the main objections the residents of Harewood Road have to this development is because of its size, bulk and massing and overdevelopment. If it was converted into 2 flats, 1 3-bed and 1 2-bed, it would be acceptable to residents, but squeezing a 3rd small flat with less than adequate bedroom is certainly not, which in my view, unreasonable. Looking closely at the plans, squeezing in a 3rd 1-bed flat is really not necessary. Surely Merton's strategy is to get good, decent quality housing for the residents that need it most, or is it? Having 2 family homes with good sized rooms would not only be more desirable to have in Merton when there is a need for family homes, as there is already a glut of 1-bed flats. As the residents have made clear, there are several inconsistencies within the plan. Most importantly, the provision for the waste bins seems totally inadequate. In Collier's words, storage of waste bins is very important, and it is at this point in its development, we ensure we get everything right with every detail and nothing overlooked. We must ensure we are not stoking problems for the future. It is important that when making decisions that Merton ensures that the right sort of houses providing decent accommodation to residents is more important than fulfilling targets at any cost, because this defeats the objective of providing good quality housing for the residents of Merton. In closing, I ask you, when you make your deliberations, you consider the plans carefully and urge the developer to reconsider their design.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. We now go back to Stuart, the officer. If there's anything specific in those 4 contributions that you wish to come back on.
Just a couple of points. In terms of overdevelopment, which has been raised, just to emphasise that all the units proposed meet minimum space standards. It's making optimal use of the site. In terms of splitting the garden into 3, that isn't a characteristic of that area. However, officers don't feel that would be harmful. And in this instance, it's quite unusual that each of the flats would have access to their own private garden, which is often quite difficult to achieve in house conversions. In terms of the inaccurate plans, officers have checked on those points raised by objectors. As set out in the mod sheet, we can sort of belt and braces check that. If members were to approve the application, we can ask the agent on the applicant to provide dimensions on the drawings just to double check that, but as far as officers can see, that those plans are correct. And in terms of drainage, the objector is quite right, that does fall outside planning.
Thank you. On the refuse, the report says that the proposal, as we can see it, complies with our strategy and policy on refuse. Obviously, if it is correct, the discussion about where the boundary is drawn and how narrow that is, if the boundary is drawn somewhat narrow, and then the developer would have to come back to us to approve their plans at a later stage if we were to pass it. I'll move to questions from members of the committee on questions on the report. First, Councillor Crowe. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brent mentioned that he thought the ceilings were below the minimum standard of 2.3 metres. And Mr. Lomas was concerned that his chimney would somehow be affected by these plans. Could the officer please comment on those?
In terms of the internal head height, obviously if the proposal is conversion of the property into flats, the existing head heights as will be what they are. So that's usually for new builds in terms of minimum sort of head heights. So in terms of, so what was the second point that you raised? Oh, the chimney, sorry. Yeah, the removal of chimney wouldn't normally require planning permission in any event, and that would be covered under building control, so it would be separate from planning.
I want to clarify further on that. The removal of their own chimney is not under planning permission, but the removal of next door neighbour's chimney, surely building control wouldn't allow that without the next door neighbour agreeing it.
So if it's removal of the neighbour's chimney, then they will obviously have to get the approval from the neighbour to carry out those works, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. One more question, Councillor Henry. Joan.
I just want to find out, I mean, I noticed you on your diagram, you show the entrance will be at the side, but is that the alleyway? Are they sharing with next door neighbor, that little small entrance going in? Because at the end of the day, I just want to find out if they're sharing with next door neighbor where the entrance for the new build going to be.
I think I can answer that. According to the plans, that alleyway running all the way up the side to the gardens at the back and entering into the flats at the side would be for the sole use of the occupants of the 3 properties on that, but not shared with a neighbour. So it'd just be for the occupants of the the proposed flats on this site. Seeing no more, one further question, Councillor Latif. There's you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brent said that he believed that the elevations and the plan drawings were inconsistent and showed different areas and different measurements. And then were led on to say that that could affect the minimum areas for the standard. Is that correct?
If the plans are incorrect, which officers don't believe they are, then that could affect the internal room sizes. Yeah, that is correct. But as I said, we can sort of do a belt and braces if members are to recommend approval or allow approval. We could ask the architect to provide more detailed drawings in terms of annotations on those plans. If they are indeed wrong, then we'd have to look to see how that affects the overall standard of the accommodation.
Okay, comments on the debate on the officer's recommendation, which is to grant planning permission. Councillor Draper first. Nick.
Yeah, just a very brief one. The reality is that if the application includes the next door neighbour's chimney, which is perfectly legal under the law, and the neighbour refuses to allow that chimney to be demolished, which I suspect he probably would, then they'd have to just produce another planning application anyway. We haven't got a reason for rejecting it on that basis. Thank you.
My understanding is that if we were to give this permission this evening, they could do everything in the plans except knock down the neighbour's chimney, if that is in fact in the plans. It seems a little bit unclear from the drawings, but that would be, as with the last issue we discussed, for planning officers and building control at a later date, if we were to pass it. It isn't really a material planning consideration for our decision this evening. I see any other comments? Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the comparison on page 17 with the previously refused application, and in the sort of tick box way of going through and saying, well, has that been addressed? It does seem to me that reasons 2, 3, 4 are dealt with. It's just this, the first one about minimum standards for space for a single bedroom flat. And so perhaps I should have queried this before, but a suggestion that the space has been reconfigured to include part of a corridor to meet the minimum standard. I mean, if that were the case, I'd not be happy that had.
I'm sure an officer will interrupt me if I'm wrong in this, but my understanding is that the calculations on the total floor space inside the building and corridors linking 2 rooms are part of that. And so if the total floor space hits the standard, I don't think it's relevant whether it's part of a living area, part of a kitchen, or a corridor linking 2 rooms. I think we just look at the number of the total amount of floor space. It might be a flaw in planning law, but we work under planning law. I'm seeing no other councillors wanting to comment, so I'm going to move to the vote.
Sorry, last minute one. I do empathise with the concerns raised by the objectors and by Councillor Atwar, who clearly speaks with the best interests of the residents in mind. I'm just not convinced of what the planning reason would be to turn this down. I'm not particularly enthusiastic about it. It does seem, to be turning a family home into a more crowded site. I'm just not sure that it's overcrowding, or I'm not sure that it could be put in a planning terms for why to reject it. So conflicted, do empathise. I'm just not sure what we could put forward for rejection. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I'm going to repeat a comment I think I made at the last meeting, or possibly the meeting before, that we as a committee don't have the ability to amend planning applications. It may be we all think it would be better if this was 2 larger family homes instead of 3 smaller homes. we cannot amend the application to make it that. We can either pass it or refuse it on the application as it stands. And as Billy says, I haven't heard yet from any councillor proposing we refuse. And if we were to want to refuse, we'd have to come up with those planning grounds that don't seem obvious at the moment, but we will see. I'm going to now move it to the vote. The officer recommendation is grant planning permission subject to conditions. Can I see those in favour? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 in favour, my non-vote and the Liberal Democrat absent makes the 10. So that one is passed. Agreed. Next one in the order I gave is agenda item number 6, 16 to 20 Morden Road in Abbey Ward, the erection of a 5-storey building to provide both residential and commercial. I thought this one was Stuart. Are you back in this hot seat?
It's the other Tim online.
It's the other Tim online. Okay, as we heard from earlier, Tim Lipscomb is presenting the report on this one, agenda item 6. Go ahead, Tim.
Good evening, members. Thank you, Chair. If you bear with me, I will just share my screen to include the presentation. Hopefully now you should be able to see my screen. I'm afraid it's not appearing in quite the way. Ah, okay.
It does show that you are sharing your screen. There we are. Got it. Go
Excellent. Okay. Taking you through the plans. Sorry, bear with me. It should be doing this in full screen mode, but I seem to have lost the ability to do that, but I will take you through as it stands. Here you can see the site, the existing former Barclays Bank building. In terms of the surrounding area, you've got the High Path estate here, which is due to be redeveloped with taller buildings in the near future. South Wimbledon Tube Station is on the corner here. Spur House, a tall residential building adjacent to the site. To the immediate rear are much smaller 2-storey terrace housing. And the buildings to the back here are outshots of the residential elements of Spur House. Here there is another flatted block to the south of the development site. Here you can see the existing building, and this is Spur House, the taller building to the side. It was offices on the 1st and 2nd floor and at Barclays Bank below. There is now a prior approval application for a change of use of the building to residential. Here you can see the existing site layout. So the site is accessed via the side road here, which then leads onto a parking area at the back. And you'll note that there's a large tree here, but that would be unaffected by the proposals. Moving up, you see there's a recess to the back of the building. And I'll show you how that appears on the elevations. Oh, well, it's a slightly lower set down part of the building. We'll see it on the photos. Moving on to the proposed development, you can see the ground floor layout here. And now the proposal is set out at page 36 of the agenda. So the proposal is to erect a part 5, part 6-storey building with basement to provide 25 flats with 3 commercial units at ground floor level. So you can see here the 3 commercial units at the frontage, and then smaller residential units behind, an area of communal space here, 3 parking spaces, which would all be reserved for blue badge holders. 2 of those would be to serve the residential use and 1 to serve the commercial uses on site. A store for refuse and a store for air source heat pumps, with the bike store having been moved internally. So when the application first came in, we had the bike store to the frontage, which didn't assist in creating an active frontage here. So that's been revised and an additional commercial unit proposed. If I take you through the plans individually, here you can see the ground floor plan in a bit more detail. So there's an entrance from the rear from the parking area and entrance out to the communal space here. Each of the ground floor units also has its own entrance to the rear. Now, I'd just like to take you through these drawings, as I'm afraid they weren't included on the plans in the agenda. They are on the website and have formed part of the application. The first to fourth floor would follow the same layout, and that is the same layout as in the previous application, which I'll come on to the significance of that shortly. Here you can see the top floor, again, that hasn't changed since the previous application, a set down element at the rear with an area of communal amenity space and other green roofs. Now, if I take you back to the main presentation, this is actually a view from the rear and then a view from the side. And if I take you down and show you the view from the frontage and how it integrates into the street scene. Bear with me. Okay, here we go. So you can see the height of the building in relation to the adjacent spur house. Here is a section drawing which shows the step down bit, which would be an area of external amenity space for all residents. As I say, the application is a revision of a refused application, and in the report you can see the key comments of the inspector are highlighted at paragraph 4.14. Bear with me, I'll come on to that. So this is the front elevation with protruding elements and window surrounds and street parking, street planting to the frontage there. In terms of massing in relation to the surrounding buildings, you can see in red the proposed building and proposed 3D visuals. Now, apologies, these aren't appearing larger on your screen. So you can see the shape of the building with the step down section below and the amenity space above and also to the rear here. The only thing to note on this drawing is that this actually shows the arrangement with a bike store at the front, but the bulk and massing of the building otherwise is very similar. Well, the bulk and massing is exactly the same. It's just a detailing of this front area. So moving on to the previous refusal. As I say, the key comments of the inspector highlighted in paragraph 4.14. Some important parts to note from that in terms of the inspector's conclusions are: the proposed building's exterior style would combine modern architectural personality with a harmonious rhythm of fenestration and materials. Furthermore, it would provide a more gradual step down between the building heights of the taller spur house to the lower Falcon house than the existing situation. This would moderate the blank expanse of the southern gable end of spur house, that's a neighbouring property, building, and provide a visually smoother transition between the mass of these blocks. So it's clear from that that the inspector accepted the bulk massing and general design of the building. However, the issue that was raised is that the proposed landscaped frontage area, and then you can see that here because previously these were to serve dual aspect dwellings at ground floor level with an opening directly onto the main road. So the proposed landscape frontage area would appear inadequate in proportion to the highway corridor, the proposed block, and more traditional landscape setbacks between the highway and housing and Morden Road. This aspect of the residential proposal would be discordant with the character of the area. So a clear objection to the ground floor residential units and how that would appear in the street scene. A associated concern from the ground floor units related to the living standards in terms of dominance of traffic, frontage design, landscaping and ventilation and cooling of single aspect units. The inspector found the degree of single aspect units was acceptable, but a cooling and ventilation assessment would be needed to demonstrate that they would avoid overheating without reliance on mechanical cooling systems. And you'll see that the full wording of the decision is included in the modification sheet. So if I take you through the plan, you'll see that the front elevation is very similar. The difference is being that this scheme tried to provide some defensible space at the frontage, and it had a very low overhang above it, whereas now it's pushed up a little bit more and there's space for signage, and it doesn't include these areas which are seeking to provide some degree of defensive space. It provides a continuous glazed frontage. In terms of the previous scheme, it's of note that the bulk, massing, materials and general design of the proposed building remain as per the previous application. The ground floor layout has altered, and the current scheme does not involve residential units at ground floor fronting onto Morden Road, but instead would provide glazed shop front commercial units to this frontage. As a result, the previously proposed ground floor family-sized dual aspect residential units have been omitted from the scheme, and smaller single aspect units have been proposed in their place. But this really as a result of the refusal based on the residential units fronting the road. So this would indicate that the applicant has responded to those concerns. The proposal is now reduced from 26 units to 25 because of these additional commercial elements. The layout of the upper floors and the rear amenity parking area remains as per the previous application, so the changes are limited to the ground floor only. Given that the ground floor residential units have been removed from the scheme, that the inspector supported the use of winter balconies as a means of providing amenity space, in addition to communal amenity space, officers conclude that the application has overcome the concerns raised in regard to the standard of accommodation. In addition, removing the objectionable ground floor residential units that fronted onto Morden Road has allowed the design of that area of the frontage to be altered to be more suitable to the setting of the busy road, rather than residential frontages leading directly onto the pavement almost. As with the previous scheme, whilst there would be a change to outlook and some marginal impact on light to neighbouring properties, the proposal is not considered to result in material harm to neighbouring amenity. And it's of note that that wasn't a reason for refusal previously, and it wasn't an area that the inspector raised concern on. In terms of affordable housing, you'll note on the mod sheet that we now have received comments from the council's external viability assessors, and that no financial contribution is viable. There are some areas of disagreement in terms of the figures that go in. However, even on the best case scenario, the council's external viability consultants still conclude that no affordable housing contribution could be viable. And that was the same as with the previous application, unfortunately. As with the previous scheme, no objection is raised on other grounds, such as transport grounds, climate change, air quality, drainage, or basement considerations, and that is subject to potential mitigations secured through the Section 106 process. So members will note that some additional information in relation to air quality and climate change is recommended to be secured by way of 106 agreement, to ensure that any mitigation necessary, whether that be actual physical mitigation on site or by way of a financial contribution, is captured by the application. Critically, members should consider whether the revised proposal has overcome the concerns of the inspector in the previous appeal. The bulk and massing of the proposed building and the general design and form remain as per the previous scheme. The changes to the ground floor are considered to have overcome the issues raised. In addition, the applicant has now provided details of cooling and ventilation. The conclusion is set out at page 73, and the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions and legal agreement as set out at page 74. So that would be to include restricting parking permits, a car club membership for all eligible adults, a potential carbon offset, a potential air quality neutral financial contribution, and early and late stage review of affordable housing financial contributions. In terms of air quality, the previous decision was made following the publication of the new London plan. So the previous decision was made under the same policy landscape that we're considering this current application under. The inspector didn't raise any concern in regards to air quality or require details to indicate that the development would be air quality neutral. So it's now a requirement of the new London plan that all development demonstrate that it's air quality neutral. However, there are exceptions to that. In the cases where schemes are not resulting in additional motor vehicle parking, that do not lead to an increase in motor vehicle movements, and do not include new combustion plants such as gas-fired boilers, they are assumed to be air quality neutral. However, 10% of the yearly heat demand from this scheme would be by gas-fired boilers. Therefore, we are including a requirement for an air quality neutral assessment as part of the Section 106 dealings, which will identify whether mitigation is required. The impact on air quality is an improvement over the previous scheme because it removes the ground floor receptors, residential receptors, which was the key concern. Any further mitigation required, as I say, can be secured by way of condition and legal agreement. In terms of climate change, you'll note that there is a sustainability statement submitted with the application. Yes, sorry.
Can I ask you to wind up a little bit?
Okay, sorry about that.
Rather long
I'm just
presentation.
getting very to the end. The sustainability statement is submitted with the final details to be sought by legal agreement. Therefore, the recommendation is as set out in the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Sorry to burst in just as you were finishing.
Not at all.
Right, we have 3 speakers on this, an objector against, obviously the agent in favour, and then a statement to be read from one of the local councillors. Our objector is Sarah Sharp, who's not in the room, I'm assuming on Zoom. Yes, I can see you there. Go ahead, Sarah, you have 3 minutes. Someone will remind you when there's a minute to go.
Okay, thank you. 2 years ago, you refused an almost identical application for 26 flats on this intensely busy A219 and A238 roads. The design review panel gave it red. The applicant took it to appeal and lost. It's back tonight with 25 flats with more single aspect dwellings than before, with the same plans in the design and access statement for floors 1 to 6. The defensible hedge has gone, the old defunct energy statement submitted verbatim. There is no BREEAM rating at all, and no separation between residential and commercial waste and services. And again, it offers no affordable housing. We need high quality housing, especially affordable, to last and be fit for purpose for the next 5 decades. And the reasons for rejecting the previous application, policies CS14, DMD2, and the NPPF remain valid tonight because the changes in this new application are limited to the ground floor. The rest of the development is identical to the previous application. Add to that the planning inspector's appeal decision, which is a material consideration, and the new London Plan Policies D6 on design, housing and energy. And this application doesn't comply with them. The officer says 2 residential units fronting the development on the ground floor are now replaced with 3 commercial units, and this removes the planning officer's concerns. But it doesn't, because the inspector ruled in points 11 to 15 that the developments as a whole, including floors 1 to 6, couldn't achieve suitable living conditions in spite of the winter balconies. The limited building setback in proximity to the intense traffic highway, even with soft landscaping, hedging and compact trees, couldn't achieve comfortable living conditions for all future residents of the development. That included those entering and exiting the block, not just for the ground floor occupants. So even if it's commercial units now, the resident entrance remains at the front. The development doesn't comply with the London Plan D6 on high quality housing, attractive design, or on avoiding single aspect dwellings. Single aspect dwellings have increased to 11 from 9. Yes, they're not north facing, but the London Plan says all single aspects must demonstrate light passive ventilation, passive, not mechanical, and how they avoid overheating without relying on mechanical cooling systems in all habitable rooms and kitchen, and that has not been done. I don't oppose a modern build on this site, but surely we can do much better than this intimidating, unwelcoming mass of dark grey brick cladding and dark grey powder-coated windows and doors with no clear contextual design narrative. Where's the joy? Where's the greening? Where's the retrofitting like Wellington House instead of demolition? This application opposes more policies than the refused application, and I urge you to reject it, especially as it sits on a harsh and relentless grey traffic thoroughfare. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. The agent now gets the equivalent time, so 3 minutes, and then there's an Edward Ledwidge. I can't see in the room, so I'm assuming he's on Zoom as well. Make yourself known. Do you know if we have him? It doesn't look like it. if it's a technical glitch and he's lost connection and will come back, then we will let him back when we've had the statement from the local ward councillor, Councillor Nigel Benbow, which is to be read by Officer Amy.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the idea of new residential development at the disused Barclays Bank site on Morden Road. However, I will not hesitate to say from the start of the statement that the proposed planning application is still presented as a poorly designed and poor quality building that I do not wish to see in my ward, Abbey, South Wimbledon. From tonight's packed documentation, you will have read the design review panelist didn't like the pre-planning application back in 2020 and was rejected. I understand today's proposals have been amended, the PAC's rejection in 2020, but why now no affordable housing or commuted sum offered, but has the planner's recommendation for approval? Why isn't it against the council's policy of 40% of affordable housing? And were any public consultations taken place? No, of course not. Just another residential block ruining the landscape of South Wimbledon. No creative thoughts were given to the building fitting into our local community, but it has an adverse effect on the character of South Wimbledon. The revised proposed residential block would be 5 stories high, containing 25 residential units and 2 commercial units. Therefore, very little has been changed compared to the previous application heard in 2020. It was rejected due to the reason of their architectural form and facing materials would result in a development that fails to relate positively and appropriately to local character to the detriment of the visual amenities of the area and failing to deliver a housing development of the highest quality in relation to its context. The building appearance is still very unappealing, finished in light grey and dark grey facing brickwork with projecting window frames in dark grey coated aluminium. It is not high quality architecture, but it is of poor quality design. The proposed development would have a dominant and detrimental effect on the occupiers of Falcon House in terms of overlooking and loss to light to windows, many of which serve habitable rooms. The development would have windows facing Falcon House. Residents living in Spur House, right-hand side of the proposed development, are deeply concerned about the potential loss of light affecting their homes. Due to noise pollution from road traffic, residents have faced considerable issues. For the well-being of future residents, special attention must be given to these factors. This building will impact the skyline in our community with another high-rise block of flats and is becoming a common feature in South Wimbledon. The appearance and architecture cannot be described as high quality and is unambitious, dated, and does not derive from any good local context. Very little is mentioned about the surrounding landscaping. Considering the amount of air quality produced in South Wimbledon, there are still no signs of reducing traffic-related emissions. Astonishingly, the local police have had no contact with the developers before this application. They have strongly recommended the developers contact the Designing Out Crime Office to discuss secure by design. It is susceptible to antisocial behaviour at the rear of the development. Comments from the police stated the need for controlled access doors. The communal residential entrance lobby should be airlocked by a second set of access controlled doors, cycle storage, defensible space around the windows, the need for the CCTV system and lighting. Having said the above, I strongly urge panellists to reject this lousy design that would not enhance the appearance of the building in our community and fail to meet the minimum requirements of 40% housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amy, for just about managing to get all of Councillor Benbow's statement in, rattle through it and get it in the 3 minutes. I'm assuming Mr. Ledridge, the agent, has not joined the meeting and isn't in the room. So that is it for comments from outside of the committee. I'll move to questions from our members, which is in order. Christie, Southgate, Henry, Butler.
Oh,
Billy.
Sorry, Chair, would you like me to come back on any comments from the public speaking?
Oh, sorry, I forgot that part. Yes. Is there anything specific you need to come back on? Yes.
I'll just run through it quickly. Yes, it is noticed the scheme got a red at, or noted the scheme got a red at DRP previously. That was not the current scheme that we're seeing before us. That was a significantly different and earlier version of the scheme. Members will note that the Urban Design Officer has not raised significant concerns, and in fact, the comments he did made on this application have been taken into account by the applicant, and the frontage design altered to allow for signage above the commercial units. There are more single aspect units proposed in this current scheme, but that is as a direct result of the changes that effectively we asked for in order to remove the residential units at the frontage. So those units on the ground floor are no longer dual aspect with the front and the rear, they are single aspect. So that explains the difference in single aspect units. However, they are all east or west facing units. In terms of the lack of information on some of the climate change elements, yes, this is noted, and this is why we're looking to secure more details by way of condition and legal agreement. Critically, you'll see that the energy statement submitted by the applicant does demonstrate that they would be meeting the 35% reduction in CO2 levels on site. So it's the detail rather than the entire direction of the climate change information. In terms of separation between commercial and residential waste, members will note that the bin store is actually very large for this size of development, and it can more than easily be subdivided or managed in such a way that both are collected from the same spot. The comments of the inspector clearly relate to the concerns about the ground floor elements, not the floors above, and this is why quite often you won't see ground floor residential uses directly fronting onto a very busy area. But of course, to somehow extrapolate that relates to all floors of the building would not follow, and that's not what the inspector's decision indicates. In terms of mechanical ventilation, we can deal with this as a way of condition, but the applicant has provided more information in that regard. Moving on to the second speaker's comments, yes, there is a requirement for 40% affordable housing, 35% if it meets the Mayor's fast track standard. However, members will also be aware that that is subject to a viability assessment. If we've had clear indication that the scheme is not financially viable, we would not be on a very sound ground to refuse the application on that basis, and it could be deemed as unreasonable in the light of the evidence we have. In terms of loss of light, as I've explained, this was not a reason for refusal previously, and the bulk and massing remains the same. Secured by design comments are noted, and this is your note controlled by way of condition. So details like airlock doors can be included. And that is all of my observations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions to the officers on the, yes, and I have the four. Councillors Christie, Southgate, Henry and Butler in that order. So Billy.
Thank you, Chair. On the affordable housing, I don't understand how this site, which is directly opposite a tube station, short walk away from Wimbledon train station and on a route with main buses, I don't understand how a site we can propose to have a development built there and this scheme not be profitable enough to be considered viable to even make a contribution to affordable housing. You know, in 7.5.8 in the report, to me, unless I'm misunderstanding it, specifically states how valuable this site itself is, particularly under its current uses. So I don't understand why it wouldn't follow that the properties that are proposed to be built would be able to be sold or rented at a premium. I appreciate a viability assessment has come in and has told us that it's not viable, but can we have some more information as to why? What is the logic behind that? How can this site not be considered viable? What is the prohibitive factor here? Thank you.
Thank you. And as before, we'll take all four questions and then go back to the officer. So Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the mod sheet, the third paragraph says there are areas of disagreement over build costs, but then it gives two identical figures. So can we have one of those corrected? Is our viability consultant's estimate lower?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Henry, Joan.
To understand benchmark land value, that's not necessarily what the applicant has paid, but a current valuation of what it might be worth in the market. Can we just have that confirmed?
Okay, we'll come to that. Councillor Henry, your question.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pass my question. I was going to ask about affordable houses, but Christy asked already.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butler, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some of my questions are already taken and very well asked. What I want to add here is just the officer's original presentation on this tonight. in concluding the reasons of refusal before and the justification for suggesting we grant this tonight. The reasoning seems to be only on the one point on the changes of the ground floor, which, spoiler for my comments later, is in my judgment not enough. But there still is in play here the other three reasons in the single aspect, the architectural character, the other two reasons, sorry. Can I just clarify on that point in terms of the main changes that the developers made that have changed the officer's recommendation to grant? Thank you.
Okay, so Tim, there's the question on the assessment on affordability. Some questions from Councillor Southgate on costs and the market value of the land, and Ben repeating some of this, but also asking about the, I believe, 3 reasons why we rejected last time. One of them has been dealt with. The other 2 seem to be still outstanding, or we could refuse with exactly the same 2 grounds, even with the inspector's judgment. So if you could cover those, please, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to affordable housing, if I could just share my screen and you'll be able to see some more details. Apologies, that was a typo. I do appear to have put that same figure in twice. You'll be able to see the correct figure when I show the screen. So obviously this is not, there's a lot of figures here, and I can't necessarily give you a summary of the matter within the few minutes that we have here. The information is available to view on the website and has been available to view leading up to the meeting. So you'll see that though I take you through the email from the viability consultants. So the benchmark land value, there's a disagreement over that. The Altair, who are the viability consultants, believe that that should be lower than the applicant assumes. There is a difference in build cost as well, extrapolated out across the building. There's a slight disagreement on commercial yield, 6 to 5.5%. So all these different inputs will have a different output, obviously, at the end. It's fair to say that any viability consultant employed by a developer is looking to minimize any affordable housing contributions or provision, whereas the viability consultants employed by the council do not have that bias. Arguably, they're looking at this from a very black and white point of view. Other issues that we have on this are the finance rate, slightly different, 6.5% versus 6%. The appellant hasn't assumed ground rents, and therefore that's something that's been included as well. So all these factors coming together indicate quite a difference in position between our viability consultants and the applicants. So the applicant shows a scheme deficit of almost 3 million compared to our consultants showing a deficit of closer to 500,000. However, that would still mean, as I say, on this best case, worst case versus best case scenario, that it's still not viable. Now, I agree with the concerns which are highlighted. This is a site in a central area. They're putting a lot more built form onto it. In simple terms, how can it possibly not be viable to provide affordable housing? However, the policy is subject to a get out clause, if you like, on the basis of financial viability. And that is exactly what has happened in this case, that the applicants have provided a detailed demonstration of the financial viability of the scheme that has been reviewed by an independent third party, and they conclude that the scheme is not viable. So unless we have very specific evidence to the contrary, my advice would be that we'd be on very unsound ground to refuse when we have sought professional professional advice on this matter, and it's concluded that it wouldn't be viable. In terms of the other 2 reasons, what we do need to distinguish between is the reasons for refusal by the council and the reasons for refusal by the inspector. So the inspector's decision is a material planning consideration, and we can't simply overlook the the comments that they've made. So the inspector did find that the level of single aspect units was acceptable, and he noted that there were elements of the design which made these good single aspect units, and he also noted that they were only east and west facing and therefore not north facing. The current scheme introduces more single aspect units, as I explained, at the ground floor. So there is a concern there, but seeing as the applicant has responded to concerns that we raised, it would not seem entirely reasonable to penalise on that point. Details of ventilation are to be secured and controlled by way of condition. And as I say, that would be officers consider that it has overcome those concerns. If there's anything further that I can elaborate on, please let me know and I will do so.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm seeing no more questions, so I'll go to comments on the debate, which is on the recommendation to grant permission. Councillor Butler first.
Thank you, Chair. And just to start with a conclusion, I suppose, this is a proposal to refuse. Because for me, even on the one thing that the officers have suggested that we grant this with, I don't think that is good enough. I think, frankly, there's a confusion between a developer responding to a refusal and wanting to change it to actually doing good enough changes. And I don't think that's happened here. And that's in addition to the architectural form and character, which I think is linked to the ground floor situation. I don't think there's enough space given in this changed application as there wasn't before. And this is especially when you look at the character and the amenity space on the streets when you're coming south to north to the junction. Those have been my main reasons to refuse this application. And a slight comment that's not related. I do not think the affordable housing viability is good enough on that. But I don't think, from what I've heard, we should put that in our refusal tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll go Alan Brutus and Draper in that order. Stephen.
Thank you. If we do reject this application by 10 p.m. from 7 p.m, contrary to officer recommendation, will have deferred or rejected 136 units of housing tonight, many of them in the Wimbledon area of the borough, and with some affordable there. Tim Lumscombe at one stage was asked by the chair to hurry along. That's fine, it's the chair's prerogative, but I found Tim Lipscombe detailed, comprehensive, addressed the previous application, the inspector's concerns being addressed. Tim Lipscombe has informed us that we're on very, very icy and thin foundations. If we do reject, viability has to be looked at, and it's for the government, the policymakers, to grab a hold of this viability aspect. If officers are saying the viability has been done, the independent viability experts of the local authority has seen this and has agreed this. Obviously, I would want as much affordable as possible, but the facts are there. I think we should go with this. It's more housing in a much needed borough. It's an infill borough. We don't have the numbers of units, 500, 600, where affordable fits in really, really nicely and really, really well. Where you're getting 20, 30 units, you will be struggling on the viability. But we have officer recommendations here, and we're ignoring them, and we have to put up with the consequences after this month, after May, of picking the pieces up when we invariably lose on appeal. So I would urge my colleagues, all my colleagues here, to really think deep, long and hard about going against officer recommendations again.
Thank you. Councillor Draper, Nick.
Yeah, I've heard all of that, and I am going to vote for this, but colleagues, so far we've done 140 homes, which we deferred or rejected or accepted, of which only eight have been affordable, and even then we were quarrelling over it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, either we get viability consultants who really want to work harder for people needing affordable housing, which is a large percentage of our population, or we admit that Merton, unlike its neighbours, just can't hack it. Because that's the kind of feeling that I'm getting tonight. I'm really, really, really disappointed. And of course, I'll vote for this. It's not a bad scheme. Thank you very much.
Councillor Crowe, Stephen.
I think the issue here is that we have seen two big applications and no affordable housing or 8 affordable units. Now, on this particular application, the financial viability study suggests it's not feasible. And I kind of agree with Councillor Christie. It's hard to imagine why that is the case, given the location opposite South Wimbledon tube station. And I think there is something wrong here, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. I feel that the viability applies to this particular application, but it doesn't necessarily apply to this site. If there was a different application for the same site, we might get some affordable housing. But if we approve the application in front of us, we'll never know. Alternatively, if we reject the application in front of us, something different might come along, which will meet, or at least go some way to give us some affordable housing. So I think we've got to kind of stick with our policies and say, we want applications that meet affordable housing. And if you can't come up with that, have another think. So on that basis, I would be in favour of rejecting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this whole system of viability assessments is flawed and needs changing from national government. But I think it was instructive where it explained that developers will usually want to decrease the amount of affordable housing, anything, and that we as a council are experts on neutral. If the developers are going to be biased in favour of decreasing, then maybe our assessors should be biased the opposite direction to balance that out. And I think that might be a way we should go forward in the future. But that is aside from this particular application. Can I see any other comments on the application? Councillor Southgate, Peter.
I am, to say the least, unnerved by the wide discrepancies between the applicant's assessments on really all the numbers here in the mod sheet. You know, that and our own assessors, more than £1 million, and the bottom line really is a deficit from the applicant's estimate of 3 million against ours of £500,000. So don't trust the figures, I'm afraid. Still, there is a problem with this ground floor, isn't there? That's pushed us into the position of having more single aspect units now. And I note the comments of the urban design officer. It would be better if the whole ground floor was non-residential, and then it goes on to detail the stair court could be moved and so on. And I don't, I mean, knowing the site well, and really anything residential, even around the back at ground floor level, is not an attractive prospect. And I think as I walked past the ludicrously named Madison Heights the other day, I remember that coming here for an additional flats on top and realizing just how bad it was actually. So I'm not happy about the clearly about the affordable aspect. I mean, I would at very least like more agreement between the two estimates to have confidence in them. And I do think the treatment of the ground floor, I appreciate what's been done there by introducing commercial units, but it does then cause other problems, the increase in the number of single aspect units. So I appreciate the developer is probably tearing his hair now and saying, is there any way of pleasing these people? But I'm not satisfied with it as it stands. I would support refusal.
Okay. I'll let you back in. Yes, Ben. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add quickly on this, because I just wanted, because this is a public meeting and there's been points made about the need for housing, and I completely agree with that. And this is in my ward, and don't I know that we need housing there? I want to still propose a refusal on the, in my opinion, lackluster changes that they've made in response to the refusal before. But also on the affordable housing, just as this may be one of my last council meetings, just to say what on earth does the character of an area mean? Because we are, as a council, saying that the regeneration of the High Path estate is sorely needed, which it is in my opinion, and that a vastly higher number of good social homes in this area is a good thing. And if we're saying that this isn't viable to put affordable housing in, and affordable social housing being an important distinction, I think to put zero affordable housing in there would be completely detrimental to the character of the area, in my opinion. Obviously, that might not be a judicial planning distinction that we're putting in the rules, but I just want it on the record that I think that's a consideration that needs to be made. But yeah, overall, I think we should refuse. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to take it to the vote on Councillor Butler's proposal to reject. And can I see all those in favour? And all those against? That is a 4-all tie. My casting vote is going to go against that rejection. So we take it to a vote on to grant permission. The offers a recommendation to grant permission. Can I see all those in favour? Sorry, I put my mic back on. The original vote of the 8 members not in the chair, it was a 4-4 tie. Therefore, the chair, I casted my casting vote against the proposal to reject. So now we move to a vote on the proposal to grant planning permission, and I'd like to see those in favour. And those against? Okay. I'm going to rerun the vote in case Councillor has made an error. All those in favour of granting permission? Four. That is the 5 members voting, and it's come out as 5-4. So we have agreed to grant permission to that development. Sorry for the confusion there. Okay. Now, we are now on to dealing with 2 more to go. Item 10 on the agenda, which is 41 to 47 Wimbledon Hill Road on the Hillside Ward, and Tim Bryson will present on that.
Thank you, Chair. Just share my screen. Members, this application site is on Wimbledon Hill Road in Wimbledon Town Centre. The site relates to the building known as the Bank Buildings. A number of you obviously will recognise it. The site has been before committee before, somewhat 2.5 to 3 years ago. under a previous application. The application itself is for a change of use to the building and to extend the building at the rear. It is a change of use from what's currently a mixed use at the building with retail at ground floor, with education above and also office, and it would change to a mixed use building to provide flexible Class E use at ground floor level with hotel above. So this is just the existing ground and first floor plan. So these, what is proposed at ground floor, there's currently the 4 small commercial units at ground floor. This would be altered to have 2 larger units, so they would be knocked through to create 2 larger units. This is proposed site plan. At the back, this is the proposed single-storey extension here. This extension here already exists, but it would be taken down and rebuilt as such. There's existing basements in the building which would be reused and would serve the 2 new retail units above. So at ground floor level, the hotel access proposed would be off Allewen Road here, where you'd come into a stair court and also a lift up to the upper floors. The 2 retail units at the front here and here. There's also a flexible use proposed at the rear, which could either be under hotel or office accommodation or other town centre uses under Class E, which would also incorporate the building at the back. Additional bin storage and cycle storage is also proposed here, and the site would be serviced via the existing service access alleyway at the rear of the building. Looking at the hotel use, so the proposed hotel use is a rather unconventional one. So it is proposed to be sort of what's called a part hotel, so apartment / hotel. So the idea is you have independent cooking facilities should you require it. So that is what's proposed as part of this hotel use before you. So it would be to the 1st, 2nd and 3rd floor levels. As I said, access would be off Allewen Road. Other improvements to the building are proposed externally. So currently you'll see some site pictures that the shop units have been somewhat let down over the years with various advertisements and boarding put up. The proposal would actually reinstate smarter shop units here with new glazing, and also to the side on Allewen Road. This would be, the original elevation will be reopened up, doorway reused, and then this is the extension at the back, which would be taken down to footprint level and rebuilt up to create new active unit there. Just a view from the rear. No changes on this side of the building. So looking more closely at the building, it would be, some of the elevations would be addressed and made good. The windows would be repaired where they can and painted. Looking closer at the side. So looking at some pictures, members, so as you can see, various advertisements over the years have become onto this building. As I said, knocking the 4 units into 2 and also reopening up the original cornicings here, and also reintroducing new shop fronts would be enhancement to the building. As you can see, some of the windows have been somewhat tired. So the building is looking to get revamped as part of this application. Looking to the side Allewen Road, there's a sort of a section that comes out here, which is going to be removed and original reinstated. So this would go, and this is at the back where this will be taken down and rebuilt with an active frontage as well. There's Google 3D view to try and show you at the back here various additions over the years, but essentially it's this aspect here would be taken down and rebuilt with additional bin storage built at the back here and cycle storage, and the access alley at the back would remain as is, which would service the building. And the applicants have put forward a 3D visual aid here for your consideration, just to show how they envisage the building as the end result. So overall, Chair, office consider this to be a good use of the building in the town centre, which is in much need of investment and improvement, and recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We have two speakers on this, an objector and the agent. The objector is Lynn, who has been watching the first 3 hours of our proceedings, I hope with interest, but now gets her own chance to speak. Welcome.
Thank you. I live in Orwin Road, a quiet residential street that is home to many families with young children. I and my neighbours have two main concerns with this application. Firstly, the location of the entrance. It is planned that this be relocated from Wimbledon Hill Road, the current entrance of the existing small-scale hotel, to Orwin Road, where it will be possible to access the premises 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. There is no CCTV in Orwin, and the nearest street lighting is a considerable distance away from the planned entrance. So as this will be in a dark location, it poses a safety issue for returning guests, particularly female guests. Additionally, my house is the top end of Orwin, the second house down on the opposite side, in fact. So I and my neighbours will be directly impacted by any noise or any antisocial behaviour relocating this entrance brings all day and all night, 7 days a week. Our second major concern is the lack of security. The rooms in this hotel will be more like Airbnb, a small flats, apartments. No man's security is planned at the ground floor level, a key issue identified by the police with the previous application and identified again by the police this time, who recommend an on-site concierge. Despite this, the application additionally states that security will be via a radio system, which appears to be remote from the premises. This presumably also means that CCTV viewing will be remote, both a worrying aspect in the event of any sort of emergency. With no on-site security, rooms can be easily used for multiple occupancy, for example, by away football fans visiting Plough Lane, or for criminal purposes such as drug dealing or prostitution, which is what happened in the parallel block of flats in Compton Road. I request, therefore, that the following specific conditions be included. Condition 1, the hotel entrance remain on Wimbledon Hill Road, where there is CCTV and plenty of street lighting. Condition 2, there be manned on-site security 24 hours per day to parallel access hours. Condition 3, there also be additional on-site staffing. Currently, no floor space whatsoever is allocated for staff 24 hours a day, so that in the event of a fire or an emergency, they are on hand to direct guests, particularly any who might be disabled, to a place of safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Mark Morizzi is the agent on this, and I'm assuming you're on Zoom. If he's with, oh, you're in the room. Sorry, here you are. Mark, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This application follows an original application that we had granted it on in September 2019, and it was a much larger scheme at that time of 76 units, very similar in its methodology to renovate the building, reinstate the windows, historical frontages at retail ground floor level to try and bring the building back to life. However, at the time, we looked at a much more adventurous scheme. We put a double basement in, we had a larger extensions to the back. It was a much more costly scheme. Obviously, just before COVID hit, it was a hotel scheme purely. And since then, as you know, hotels have really hit the market and haven't been viable. So what we've done is worked hard with other hotel operators that we're working with this particular developer and owner who's owned the building for a very long time and actually had these tenants in as temporary tenants, hence why the building looks as it is at the moment. Looked at other suppliers. We're working with groups such as the Native Group, which we're looking at this one. which is a high quality boutique type hotel, but hotel apartments, which is seen very well through the viability of the area. Also, we listened to local residents at the time who wanted a viable place for Wimbledon to have their family members come on the weekend. So it ranges for different types of use that this building looks to do. All of the principles of that approved application, the access from Elwan Road as the hotel entrance is being maintained, the active frontages along Elwan Road, the reinstatement of the building internally has been stripped back, but we're looking to keep a lot of the material form internally, but take off some of the old elements and bring them back to life. So it's really much seen as a refurbishment of the building, and it's been long awaited by this particular owner of the building to try and come up with a viable way of looking at bringing it back to life and serving the local community. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Tim, Bryce, and anything specifically on those two contributions you'd wish to comment on?
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the Met Police's comments, Chair, so they have done a fairly detailed commentary on the scheme, but they have commented on the entrance to the hotel, but they do request certain minimum standards for the door, and also a CCTV system to be installed. But they have, Chair, recommended conditions which we have imposed on the application should permission be granted, and these are the sorts of conditions which were similar to the previous hotel scheme previously. So really, Chair, I just wanted to raise that issue. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to questions. I'm going to have mine first. The objector raised two proposed conditions, three proposed conditions, one of which the entranceway, I think you just sort of dealt with. But the one about having security staff there 24 hours a day and on-site staffing 24 hours a day, is that something we could put in condition if we wanted to?
Chair, I think we have to look at the test of conditions, which is one of them is it reasonable and can it be enforced? I think what we have here is obviously a sort of alternative to a conventional hotel setup. But I would say that we can't condition that as it is to do with the operational sort of aspect of the building and its future occupiers. Clearly, the proposal would have to go through a form of building regs and building control aspects, but I don't believe we could realistically condition on-site security and on-site staff at all times.
Okay, thank you. Questions from other members? Councillor Allen-Breetis, Stephen.
Yeah, could the officers just confirm the facade will not only be preserved, improved, but actually brought back in some instances with, especially where all those different style shop signs, shop fittings are, because I'm very interested in the facade. My understanding is, and I want it confirmed by officers, is that the developer is actually very keen to bring out the facade as it used to be, rather than hide it.
Yes, Councillor Allen-Breetis. So I put up here what's probably useful, the 3D visual aid really submitted with the scheme. So it really captures the enhancing these, drawing out the original, let's kind of call them cornicings potentially as a word for them, but looking at removing all those shop fronts that have been added over the years and coming forward with more modern shop fronts with lots of glazing and really enhancing the building. There are external improvements to the building as well, which also includes within the DNA statement removing the slate tiles and replacing them properly on there, and sort of full refurb throughout really. We have put safeguarding conditions on for further details of those aspects because the Conservation Officer's comments has specifically mentioned this in the modification sheet. So we have safeguarding conditions for shop front design and also the windows and the roof tiles.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any more questions. I'll look for comments from members. Joan, was that a question?
Yes, this may be a simple one. Can you say how many job vacancy with this new business create in the area, please?
Unfortunately, Councillor Henry, I don't have that to hand, unfortunately, the exact figure.
Okay, comments. I'll go with Councillor Southgate and then Alan Brutus. Peter.
Yes, no, I'm quite enthused by this actually, particularly because I've actually voted against the previous scheme, which was nonetheless granted approval, because I was concerned that the 5-storey rear extension could rather harm the profile, if you like, the setting of the. So I described magnificent bank buildings. So this will not in any way interfere with that, and that's attractive. And also the cleaned up frontage is a big improvement on the clutter we've got there now. And I require only one condition, that we have no estate agents. Thank you.
Councillor Alan Brutus. I won't take that as a serious suggestion, Councillor Southgate.
Yes, I too am enthused by this. I'm really pleased with it. And, you know, boutique hotel, yes, you appreciate a traditional lobby. We all recall watching Crossroads on Midlands TV, where I used to live at the time. But these things have moved on. Technology has moved on. I think the apartment style hotel is modern, is what people want. They don't want to be guided from a lobby with their bags taken upstairs by someone who opens the door for them. They want access themselves. So I think Wimbledon is crying out for hotel space, and I'm really enthused by the attention to detail to bring that corner back. And I don't know if we don't need to have the photo back, but that painting of a lovely bird, yeah, this is what happens when things like corner buildings like that are left, and the landlord is obviously struggling to fill it with permanency. So I think this will bring some permanency to it, and I, for one, am voting for this and would urge my colleagues to do likewise.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments, so I'm going to go to the vote, which will be on the recommendation of officers to grant planning permission, subject to conditions, etc. Can I see all those in favour? That's 8-4, my not votes, the Liberal Democrat absent. So that makes up the 10 members of the committee, and that's in effect unanimous. Finally, item number 8. 225 Streatham Road, London. Stuart is to present on this one. It is unusual that it's before the committee, and the recommendation is to refuse. It's Tim on screen. Okay. Tim, go ahead.
You're mute, Tim.
No,
Tim,
sorry, it wasn't
hear you then.
intentionally on mute. I had unmuted.
We can
but
hear you now. Do
I think
start.
I had to be unmuted by the organizer. Okay, if I'd like, I share my screen now. Here you can see the position or the layout of the site as it exists currently. Sorry, bear with me. I was just getting my notes into position. So the description of the site and surroundings can be as found at page 182. Please note at paragraph 2.2, there is a typo there which says the site is occupied by a row of shops. That has since been demolished, with the current unauthorized use having been commenced on site. So this plan here is the previous layout of the site before the recent development. Now, The surrounding area is largely residential. The existing lawful use is a commercial use with a car workshop having operated at some point on the site historically. I'll talk you through the proposed layout plan. There would be a car wash service, a tyre fitting service, and a car repair service and car sales over here. Cars would enter the site here and exit here for the car wash. And for all other services, that's tyre fitting and the repairs here would come in via, and the car sales, sorry, would come in via the side road. And here you can see parking laid out on the site. You have some visuals of what the buildings look like, which are relatively accurate. There's no objection raised on that. This is a view from Streatham Road, with a rather large wall with a canopy behind it. This is the drawing of the actual workshop building, and then you can see the position of the buildings on site there. Sorry, this has all come on as one document as opposed to it wasn't needed, that section. Here you can see some more visuals from the applicant, although as to how helpful they are, it is arguable. And again, some more visuals and plans showing the structure of this building here. Sorry, bear with me, my machine's just frozen. These are provided by the applicant. The intention has been to show the degradation of the site over the years, and therefore to support the idea of the regeneration of the site in this way. In terms of site photos, here you can see the canopy which I referred to earlier and the car wash operation going on underneath that. Sorry about the appearance of the presentation here. It's not as I intended. Here is cars entering from the side road. Here you can see the view from the main road of the side of the canopy. Within the site, looking towards the closest adjoining neighbour, and then the actual building itself for the car repair works. If I take you back to the agenda, it is of note the applicant has made an additional comment just before the meeting, highlighting money spent on improving the appearance of the site and highlighting previous issues with antisocial behaviour that he's put a lot of money into to try and resolve, and highlighting a lack of support from the council and the police in resolving this. Members will see that the agent has contacted the council to request that the application be deferred to allow them to provide additional information. As you'll see, the reasons for refusal relate to inadequate information having been submitted, but that will be a matter for members to determine. In terms of the principle of development, at 7.2.2, the site has historically been in a commercial use and it is a scattered employment site. Therefore, the use as a car repair, tyre fitting and car wash would be acceptable in principle. We have looked very closely at the matter of site optimisation. There is a planning permission for a mixed use scheme involving housing, flats above. It would be beneficial to the council's housing need if this scheme were to be delivered. However, as set out in the report at page 190, you'll see that this is not an allocated housing site. And for a number of reasons, we don't believe that we could reasonably resist this application and try to push for the housing application to be implemented. Both would be acceptable in principle, and it would be ultimately up to the applicant as to how to proceed. In terms of the visual impact, the buildings on site are utilitarian in nature, not particularly attractive. However, they have a limited mass, and it's considered that they would not have an adverse impact. There are concerns regarding the impact on neighbouring amenity. The car repair, tyre fitting and car wash have the potential to generate noise and disturbance. In the absence of supporting information relating to hours of use, likely noise level, noise mitigation measures, which could be acoustic curtains or acoustic fencing, officers conclude that the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the impact would be acceptable. The council's transport planner set out there will be a severe impact at the exit for those vehicles leaving the site and those on Streatham Road waiting to get into the site. HGVs and large car transporters will be unable to turn into the site due to the restricted geometry, of the Streatham Road with the bungalows junction, and that's the small road to the side. The increased use of the existing access onto the bungalows with the generation of additional conflicting traffic movements resulting from the proposed development will be prejudicial to road safety, and in addition, no cycle parking is provided. There's also no information to indicate whether the impact on air quality would be acceptable. Site drainage, there is information on, and that's being concluded to be acceptable and can be secured by condition. Moving on to the conclusion at page 196, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable, but the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the proposed development would be acceptable in terms of disturbance to neighbouring occupiers, impact on air quality, and the impact on the safety and congestion of road networks. Therefore, the recommendation at page 197 is for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, we have two speakers on this. First, is Mr. Agar, the applicant, is in the room. You will have 3 minutes, and this will turn amber when there's 1 minute to go. Thank you. And your microphone is on.
Thank you, sir, for giving me time to explain my situation and work in the property. When I moved to the property has B8 and B2 license, and I spent more money to clean the property. I took 250 lorries, grape lorries in scrap rubbish from there. I cleaned mouse, rat, and asbestos. More than 20 drug dealers and homeless people were living in the property. I kicked them out. After that, gypsy people broke my locks and they moved into the property, and they dumped rubbish again. And they took over all tools and material, building material. My neighbor gave me their van registration number, which I gave to the police, and I have in my record. We called police several times, but the police didn't help us. I kicked the gypsy with the help of my friends from the property. I have so many crime reference number from police. I parked my car in the front of doors. I put a very short alarm to make safe the property. They try again several times to come inside, but they can't. The very short alarm system God came on the time, and my neighbor called the police. Police came again. Council closed my business without any writing notice. I tried to find some proof in the writing from council for my solicitor, but no one helped me. Only I found that the local councillor is against me. He was sending the enforcement team without writing notice. My question is that the Merton Council and councillor are working for the public or for their own benefit. Where were the council and councillor in the past 3 years when all Mecham and Streatham people dumping their rubbish there? I have some photos for your record. If you want, I can show you. We put the planning permission for car wash before we start under the state law, but council closed my tire business and my car service business, which were separate than car wash. I received call from my agent that we submit the planning permission for car wash. The council happy with our plan. The council told us you can go and open the place. After 3 days, the enforcement officer came.
That's your time, I'm afraid. I'm going to have to ask you to wind up. Just finish that sentence if you would like.
Okay, so many people complain against my planning permission. They are not my neighbor. They are away 1, 2, 3 miles away from me. The law says if anybody complain within 20 meters, acceptable. Otherwise, we are not accepted.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there. Just gone over the 3 minutes. We have a statement from the ward councillor, Councillor Kirby, to be. Councillor Kirby cannot make it this evening, another been affected by COVID, but Amy is going to read her statement.
The land that this business has applied retrospectively to operate on is of significant size. It has 2 approved applications for housing on it, providing 26 homes, one in 2017 and another in 2019, that the developer did not progress. The developer has left the site in a slum-like condition for several years, with enforcement chasing him over graffiti, fly tips and ugly hoarding. Travellers visited and dumped huge amounts of waste on the land behind the hoarding, all of this affecting the quality of the local residents' lives. So when building work started on the site, residents were excited about the housing development which they hoped would finally be built. However, housing was not being built. A metal structure was erected and residents contacted me to find out what was happening, as they had been told by site workers that it was going to be a car wash business. Enforcement stepped in to stop work to discover the landlord had leased the land to his car wash business. The business put in a retrospective application and then continued to work on the site without approval on Saturdays and Sundays, disturbing residents with the noise of hammering. Again, residents advised me that work was going to progress the car wash. Enforcement came again, however, it didn't stop them progressing the work, and then signs went up to say the business would soon be opening. At this point, understandably, residents were furious. The following day, they were operating and washing cars without planning permission. Their hoarding was scruffy, and the shutter door, one of their exits, remained covered in graffiti, which they did not think necessary to remove. Enforcement issued a stop order and closed it down. Signs were removed. Since then, it hasn't been operating. There is a car wash 200 yards down the road and another one opposite Biggs Marsh, so another one is not required in this vicinity. If this application is approved, it would bring a continuing stream of cars onto a scruffy site, which inevitably will affect residents' amenity, both in terms of visual movement and noise. The behaviour of this business so far has been without any regard to local residents or the planning process. It goes without saying that given Merton's housing targets and the fact that there is an existing permission for housing on this site, that this car wash business is not the best use for this site. I hope the committee will refuse permission.
Okay, we'll give our thanks to Councillor Kirby, Linda, for that. Tim Lipton, is there anything in particular in those 2 contributions you'd like to come back on?
I'll be very brief, Chair. I just want to clarify that the current use is an unauthorised use, and the council's enforcement team have served a temporary stop notice. Obviously, that temporary stop notice is in writing. I have to say I don't follow all of the concerns raised by the applicant, in that no written notice was given. When the enforcement team investigate a site, they wouldn't necessarily provide written notice, but the temporary stop notice itself is very much in writing. So I'm not sure exactly what the issues are there. They've recently been made aware of. So if the applicant wants to discuss that with me further, that's fine. But as I say, it's an unauthorised use and a temporary stop notice has been served. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, 2 members, do we have any questions or clarification? 2, I'll go in the order I saw the hands go up. So Southgate and then Crow. Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Streatham Road, does that have a double yellow line or red route? In other words, could cars queue outside, or would they effectively be prevented from doing so because it would be illegal?
Thank you. And Councillor Crowe will take the 2 and then come back to Tim. Stephen.
I'm just wondering whether the appropriate response is to defer this application to a future meeting rather than to refuse it at this time.
We will come to that at the end of questions. So I was going to deal with that, but if I could go to Tim just on Councillor Southgate's specific point on queuing and parking around the site.
Thank you, Chair. There are double yellow lines outside the site with a few parking bays mixed in. In fact, if I share my screen, I can show the arrangements. So you can see, I'm not sure you can see it yet. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
You can, great. So here's the double yellow lines, and that's around the vehicular access, and then otherwise there are parking bays. So the view from our highway officer or transport officer is that this would create congestion. So if there were cars occupying these bays, there may not be room for a line of cars to queue up separately from the main flow of traffic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So on Councillor Crow's point, now that questions are done and we move to the debate, we have had officers and the ward member, previous chair of this committee, recommending refusal. The applicants themselves asking for deferral, as Councillor Crow has suggested. So I think I'm safe in saying that we're not looking at approving tonight. We will either defer to get the further information that the officer's report says we need, or we refuse. So those are, I think, is what the debate is going to be on. So can I hear comments? We'll go Alan Bretus and then Southgate in that order. Stephen.
Yes, obviously, I've been talking about being respectful of officer recommendation. The officer recommendation is for refusal here, which I'm minded to go with. But if the applicant is seeking a deferral, and is it my understanding at the moment nothing is happening there, but the applicant is willing to sit down and discuss and talk, and explanation and intermediaries sitting down with the applicant about our yearning for housing there, rather than quite a clunky, heavy business use, then I wouldn't mind deferral, provided, of course, that nothing is illegal is currently happening there.
Thank you. Councillor Southgate.
Yes, I'm quite drawn to the idea of deferral. I must say, we are, I think, encouraged to look at meanwhile uses, and I do remember the application for housing on this site, which I think we all approved and we're enthusiastic about. It's a shame we can't link a meanwhile use to be time limited to encourage that that approval to be built out. Looking at the specific reasons suggested for refusal, they are, to my mind, reasons that could be addressed actually by condition. So I would suggest defer rather than refusal.
Councillor Henry, Jane.
I'd like to agree with Councillor Alan Bretis, because I've been listening to the applicant. I think some more consideration would like to put in place for further understanding. So apparently, a bit more understanding for the applicant, please.
Okay, thank you. From a planning and the planning department point of view, deferral usually would mean next meeting or the meeting after some tweaks to the plan, which is fine if you believe a tweaked plan could be acceptable to this committee. If you think it really does need to go back to the drawing board and in effect pre-application stage again to talk about whether we should go back to housing or what kind of business use to be on that site, I think it's more detail than tweaking is my, well, that's a decision you have to make. The decision is between refusal and deferral, and that decision is based on if you think the plan just needs tweaking, defer. If you think it needs a more thoroughgoing review, then you've got to go back to pre-application and refuse. So I think Councillor Christie to comment.
Sorry, Jen, it's actually a question more than a comment. How long has this been going on for in terms of going back and forth?
Oh, I don't know when this application was first. We have at the previous, I think, 2017 and 19 housing applications passed. So this one, I don't think I've got, I mean, it would be on the council's website, but the date of when the submission
if it helps, Chair, the application was valid early January this year.
Okay, so it was made relatively recently. Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'd just be helpful to understand actually just from the officer's perspective why it is being recommended for refusal as opposed to deferring or continuing to negotiate with the applicant, because obviously the officers have decided that it's worth recommending refusal. So I'm just a bit confused as to why, or just their perspective on why that is the case, rather than continuing to engage with the applicant.
Is that something you can comment on, Tim?
Yes, I mean, applications should be assessed as they stand. Quite often, if there is some tweaking to be done, in this case, the transport statement submitted with application simply didn't relate to this proposal. It was just simply a copy of the previous one relating to the residential scheme. And we have no information relating to the impact on noise. So it's not a matter that we have a transport statement and a noise impact statement and there's some clarifications over methodology or something similar. We simply have nothing to support it. So from that basis, the application has not demonstrated that its impacts are acceptable. However, the applicant has indicated they would like to address these matters further. Discussions with the agent have indicated that they could potentially consider a temporary permission. However, we've not received confirmation of that in writing. There is a current enforcement case open, and in order to resolve the breach on the land, an application is invited and then assessed. So, you know, we have gone back to the agent in February, highlighting the concerns that we have, and we don't have a revised transport statement or additional information on noise. Therefore, as the application stands, it wouldn't be acceptable in planning terms. However, if members feel that there is scope for additional discussions and negotiations to be had on this matter, then there is that option to defer. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. There being no more comments, I'm going to take this one to the vote, and I'm going to take the vote first on the recommendation by officers, which is to refuse planning permission. Can I see all those in favour of the officer's recommendation to refuse? I'm seeing one. Those against? 4, 5, 6. So we are not refusing this evening. The second proposal, the only two we have left, is to grant planning permission or defer. So I'll take a vote on the recommendation to defer to a future meeting. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 7, 1. 1 not voting makes 9, and the Liberal Democrat isn't here, makes 10. So I've said it every time, I'm sorry. So that one is deferred to a future
Is it
meeting.
possible to put a timescale to the deferment? Otherwise, I'm conscious this could go on for another few months. And
not usually, but I would normally trust officers to put it back to us when they think it is ready. Looking at this particular scheme, I would suggest that's unlikely to be at the very next meeting, although the gap between meetings this time is 6 weeks. So it's possible, but I would think it probably unlikely. But that is up to officers to recommend and then come back to us when we come through to draft and full agenda for the next meeting. So 2 more items on the agenda. 11, planning appeal decisions, a report to note. Noted. Agenda item 12, enforcement summary, a report to note. Noted. As I just mentioned, our next meeting is 6 weeks tonight and is the final one of this council term. So myself and a few others, it will be their last meeting. Well, a planned last meeting. Some others might have an unplanned last meeting. We shall see a week after our meeting in 6 weeks. But thank you all for coming tonight, and we will see you.